All right, so this is an idea that you laid on me quite some time ago, to the point that I almost forgot about it. And when you reminded me the other day, I was terrified because this one's like it turns out, is a really daunting task
Mm-hmm.
to put something like this together. And of course, we're strictly talking about male actors at the moment. I didn't know if you wanted to do actresses down the road.
That's something we could look at later.
And something that I was both troubled by and relieved by was when you suggested we should do a top 10 actors list. My immediate first question was, is that living and dead?
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, if it was just living, it's like, oh God, I really don't know. And that was a worry that I wasn't going to have enough. And then when you said yes, living and dead, it was like, oh, great, so many other choices. And then just a massive list suddenly occurred. And now that was the part that there was too many.
Hmm.
So we both made like an elimination thing because obviously when you do list videos, it tends to open the doors for people to get really bent out of shape because for some reason, if you're on the internet, for some reason it's like you're trying to say something really definitive and fuck you if you get it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So things aren't allowed to be opinion based for some reason when it comes to lists, but that's just the way we do it. I literally said this like 20 times before we did our Oscar lineups last year, and people still bitched in the comments or in the chat. But yes, this is strictly opinion based, and there's going to be a lot of people that are considered like objectively some of the greatest of all time, and I don't know who you went for, but I didn't go for them. The only thing I know about yours is your didn't make it list.
Mm-hmm. And mine's not necessarily based on like I'm not going to put these people up and say they're the best actors in the world. I did my list based on the actors I enjoy the most.
Yeah, much like when we did our top 15 movies of all time, mine's kind of a mixture of both.
Mm-hmm.
So, like we were saying, mine are yours will probably be a lot more like I don't know if it'd be relatable because mine are. We were talking about we're doing because we couldn't quite narrow it down completely. We have 10, and then we have two honorable mentions.
Mm-hmm.
And I mentioned that of those 12, five of mine are still alive.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like I said, as soon as you said living and dead is when mine really opened up. Like, oh, it'll also be a chance to talk about a lot of stuff I haven't got a chance to talk about yet, which is really exciting.
Yeah.
And I imagine yours are a little more current, even though I wouldn't be surprised if you. I know some of these are they surely they'll have to match, but
Mm-hmm. But the
um,
ones on my eliminated list that made my final cut before I did my final cuts were Kurt Russell, Nicolas Cage, Christopher Walken, Jeffrey Rush, Harrison Ford, Michael Caine, Woody Harrelson, John C. Reilly, Colin Farrell, John Goodman, and Gary Oldman. John Goodman would have been 13.
I didn't even. I considered Oldman really early, and then I ended up not even putting him down, like even as someone eliminated.
Mm-hmm.
Am I coming in clear to you? Because you were kind of, I can hear you, but you were kind of choppy there a little bit.
Yeah, you're fine on my end. It's just me that's choppy. Nothing new.
Well, some of my eliminated are a couple of current ones like Bale
Mm-hmm.
and Tom Hanks, and I really, really considered Philip Seymour Hoffman. And the thing that I'm wondering if it's going to be troubling is that even though I deeply respect these people, and like I said, they're considered kind of the objective bunch, I don't have Brando, De Niro, Pacino, or Dustin Hoffman, or Daniel Day-Lewis.
Mm-hmm.
Which might sound insane, but I'm actually really happy with the list that I do have.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not even upset about it really.
Yeah.
Even though I do love all those guys, but somebody else I was really disappointed I couldn't put here was Jeff Bridges.
Oh, Bridges didn't make the cut.
If we were doing living, he would have probably been near the top, but it's so dead heavy that,
And
that
see,
he
the,
managed
the
to get
other
through.
the other thing too is yours is from a perspective of somebody that's seen so many movies, and mine is from the perspective of somebody that's seen a lot of movies, but has a lot of holes as well.
Yeah,
So
or there's
I think mine, no disrespect to your list, but I think mine would be a lot more relatable.
Yeah.
to like the
It's
average
kind of
movie.
like, and your outlook on the older actors is probably my outlook on more foreign actors,
Hmm.
which is there's plenty that I'm aware of that probably could be here, but I don't know their filmographies as extensively as I do the ones that are here.
Hmm.
I imagine
One of
that's
my one
something.
of my honorable mentions is there for that reason. I just don't have a big enough body of work to justify moving them up the list. But what I've seen, I really enjoy.
Yeah, because some other big names I'm missing are like Peter O'Toole
Hmm.
and somebody I could have sworn was going to make it and then didn't by the time I was done that guts me is Paul Newman.
Yeah.
I went into this for sure I was going to put Paul Newman in. And then there's some supporting actors that were mainly known for supporting roles back in the day, like George Sanders and Anthony Quinn, that I really wanted to put here, but just wouldn't fit. Peter Lorre. Peter Lorre, I really considered very heavily.
See, I have a
Like,
lot of people like Paul Newman. Like, I don't have a very big body of work from him. I've seen The Color of Money, I've seen Road to Perdition, I've seen Cool Hand Luke, and I've seen parts of Butch Cassidy. That's about the extent of his filmography I know. But I know that what I've seen him in, he rules ass. So
I was gonna say to a normal person, those four might be, or those 3.5 might be enough
yeah. But
alone.
what I have seen Paul Newman in, he rules so hard. We
Yeah,
won't
it's like we
talk
were
about
saying.
Cars.
You know who else is name I threw out there, and it might seem weird if people only know him for one main role, but
Mhm.
he was an incredible actor that had a really vast array of characters in both TV and movies.
Mhm.
I really considered Burgess Meredith.
Did you?
Yeah. But like I said, despite all of those being missing, I'm so happy with this list actually.
Well, shall we dive in?
I think so.
All right, you kick us off. Honorable mention number 2, essentially number 12.
All right. Both my honorable mentions are somebody current and somebody from the past, so I thought that kind of worked out well.
Okay.
My second honorable mention is the one from the past, which is Frederick March.
Hmm.
And he is, well, before I get into his other movies real quick, the main reason that he's here is because I'd be remiss if I didn't mention him, because even though I don't consider him like a top favorite, he gives my favorite leading actor performance of all time in Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, which he won his first Oscar for. And that was because watching him and
Which
Dr. Jekyll and
obviously
Mr.
to you
Hyde,
is well deserved.
yeah, even though he tied with Wallace Beery, but it's still a win.
Mhm.
Um, but you may have noticed when I talk about movies both past and present, I'm a huge sucker for like dual performances.
Mhm.
It's like it always blows my mind when an actor can do like more than one really different performance in the same movie. And I think watching Frederick March and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is when I fell in love with that concept.
Mhm.
But then, down the line, he'd win again for the best years of our lives, beating out stuff like Jimmy Stewart and It's a Wonderful Life, because that movie's such a juggernaut, and he's such a juggernaut in it. One movie
Which is
he
so
did,
funny because it was a box office flop. It's
yeah,
Wonderful Life was. That's really funny.
and a movie that's kind of off the radar of his that I absolutely love, that's impossible to find, is a movie called One Foot in Heaven,
Mhm.
where it's like he's almost kind of going through like a story of Job kind of thing,
Mhm.
but he's like kind of a present day for the movie kind of person.
Mhm.
And I know you're familiar with a Frederick March performance because of Inherit the Wind.
Yeah.
But mainly the reason I felt the absolute need to mention him was that he gives my favorite leading performance of all time in Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And it'd be kind of weird if I didn't mention
Mhm.
him.
Mhm.
So yeah, and like I said, with all those other, and that's just a handful that I've mentioned. But those are like the standouts to me anyway.
Yeah. My first honorable mention is the situation we were talking about before, where there's a foreign library, but I don't know any of it, so I can't really talk about it. But my first honorable mention is Christoph Waltz.
Nice.
Christoph Waltz is Paul Newman. He's everything I've seen him in rules so hard. Even Spectre, which is one of the biggest Bond movie letdowns of my life, Waltz brings it. He's a great Bond villain. And I called that too because after we watched Inglourious Basterds, one of the first things I told you is Landon needs to be a Bond villain like now.
Yeah, it
And
was
they made
so
and they made him the
inevitable.
most famous one.
Yeah.
But you know, Glorious Bastards was, I believe, number 4 when we did my favorite movies list, and 90% of that is Waltz. He's so conniving and so smart, and he brings that forth so much. And then to turn around when he goes back to Tarantino to do something like Dr. King Schultz, who's such a warm, comforting character, it's
Yeah.
it's a big um, shift, I guess is the word I'm looking for. And then like you have stuff like the Green Hornet where he's just goofy as all hell, but he still pulls it off. I mean, the man changes his name to Bludnovsky.
You're gonna get to see over Christmas. I gave you a copy of Alita,
Mhm.
so you'll get to see a really nice balance there with his warmth and his badassery kind of both come into play.
Yeah,
I'll be
and
interested to see what you think of that.
it's so funny too to watch him as Landa when you learn in real life he's an absolute sweetheart. Like he is supposed to be like one of the nicest guys out there.
Yeah, and his sense of humor is exactly what you expect it to be.
I know he's kind of dorky, but I think he's great. I think everything that he touches, even if the movie he's in isn't good, you'll expect something good from him.
Yeah,
He's
there's
like,
quite a
to me, this is kind of a weird comparison, but I kind of put him on the same level as like a foreign Christopher Walken. Like the movie he's in may not be great, but you'll go see it because he's in it, and you know he'll bring something.
yeah, because he's had post Oscar wins. He's had a pretty
I think
up.
spotty's a kind word we can use.
I was gonna say up and down. Yeah, that's pretty much.
Yeah, but when he's on screen, he has a presence. Like for somebody that I'd never heard of. When we watched Bastards, I'd never heard of him. Had you heard of him before Bastards, or did you know about him?
I had seen Ordinary Decent Criminal,
Hmm.
but I never remembered him
But
because
like
he's
you go
because
into
he's got a great
Bastards
role
and you
in it.
watch it not knowing him, and he's our opening to the movie, and the way that he just commands that presence and just makes his mark. You know, it's somebody that when you're done with that scene, you're like, I gotta learn this guy's name. I gotta see more.
And Oscar voters said the same thing.
Yeah, they
I,
even committed blatant category fraud with his second win.
I remember as soon as Bastards hit Cannes, all people talked about was Waltz.
Yeah, he's phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. And like I said, it helps to know that in real life he's a super super nice dude.
All right, we're somewhat staying on topic, going to my other honorable mention. How I said my first honorable mention was going to be somebody from the past. Now my next honorable mention is somebody from the present,
Hmm.
and that's DiCaprio.
Hmm.
Because obviously he started off like in kind of a big way with This Boy's Life, followed by Gilbert Grape, and it was like, oh, this dude's going to be the biggest thing ever, or at least grew up to be this awesome character actor. And then Titanic happened, and then he became that for a very long time. And then I want to say right around, I guess when he started with Scorsese was when that started to change. When he kind of
Hmm.
lost the that pretty boy image that Titanic gave him, as they call it. Even though he's great in Titanic, also. But then we kind of saw him get sort of like grittier, and the characters he played were a lot more complex. And then we got through, The Aviator, and then The Departed, and then it just kind of kept going from there.
How many
And
real life
now,
characters has he played now?
what's that?
How many real life characters has he played now?
All of them. And the ones that he hasn't played yet are in development. But what I've noticed, and we actually talked about this a few times, was that, and I noticed this when I was trying to do my best of the decade list that we did earlier this year,
Hmm.
from 2010 to 2019, and like so many options were his. Where we had Django was obviously at the top, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was at the top, and then you have like The Wolf of Wall Street and The Revenant, Inception,
The dude
and
just I forget where I heard this term, but I will agree with you that DiCaprio just it's Ricky Bobby. He gets up in the morning, he pisses excellence.
yeah, and that's what's so exciting about him is every time he is in a movie now, it's an event.
It is he's like a Daniel Day-Lewis that works more frequently.
Yeah, and it's like it's always a big fucking deal. Like who else was going to get a movie like The Revenant the popularity that it got.
Hmm.
Because The Revenant is pretty much straight up an art movie.
Yeah.
And every fucking buddy saw it. And that is incredible.
Not only that, but while you're watching him piss excellence on the screen, you're looking at one of the most beautiful movies ever made.
Yeah.
That's one thing that stuck. That's two things that stuck with me is him and the fact that I was like, I'm watching a gorgeous movie right now.
But
It's
at the
so
same
bleak, but it's so gorgeous while it's being bleak.
and it's so grimy and like blood spattered, yet somehow that comes
Mhm.
through.
Mhm.
And the fact that like every time he does something now, like every time he signs up for something officially, that's like immediately to the anticipated list.
Mhm.
So I think that pretty much speaks for itself, doesn't it?
Yeah. My second honorable mention has kind of a small filmography-ish, but it's not his fault. And get your nostalgia feelers on. My second honorable mention is John Candy.
Oh yeah.
John Candy
Oh
always had such a warmth, like Home Alone, he was just a very warm appearing guy, but, he could turn around and do a role like JFK, which is completely out of John Candy's character.
I was just rewatching his JFK scenes on YouTube like last week.
Yeah.
And because they're so short and he left you wanting so much more, I just watched them over and over and over again. Like that clip where he's on the stand
Mhm.
is like 15 seconds long, and it's like one of my favorite moments in the movie.
Out of an almost 3-hour movie.
Yeah, 3.5
Oh,
hours.
that's right, it is 3.5. But, I mean, John Candy has such a long list too. I mean, like I said, Home Alone, Rookie of the Year, Uncle Buck, Spaceballs, The Great Outdoors, Cool Runnings. I mean, the man made his mark with the time he had.
I
And
mentioned it
he's
before,
one of
but
those people, like I told you, like at the start of the video, we talked about how this was actors that we enjoy seeing. John Candy always brings me joy when I see him.
I can't get enough of him. And like I always people always kind of give me weird looks, but then they kind of agree with me when I say that, is it weird that one of my favorite performances of his is Rookie of the Year when it's basically a cameo? Like he's not even credited.
No, he's like
But
kid friendly Bob Euchre from Major League.
yeah, he's basically like an announcer from the 40s that somehow ended up in this movie. Like he did that so naturally.
Hmm.
And
And
did
it's
you
crazy because his scenes never leave the announcing booth. He never interacts with any other characters
I think
except for
that
who's in that booth.
I think that's particularly something that kind of sticks with me with that. That it's
And I
so
think I think what helps with that too is even though they never meet on screen, especially the scene where Henry's batting, like you sense there's a connection there with two characters that never interact. Maybe not so much on Henry's side because he probably only knows who he is, probably never met him. But on John Candy's side, like his character for having never met Henry, you sense a connection there.
yeah, because when he starts off the movie, he's like, I just really could not care less if I'm here or not. Like
Mhm.
I'm gonna bet on how bad things go.
Yeah,
And then like he gets more and more excited as the movie goes. Like every new scene he has, he's more into it.
yeah.
And then by the time it gets to the end, when he's doing the "this is for all the marbles" thing,
Mhm.
glory, I love that.
So,
And
and
did
plus,
you?
one movie I didn't mention of John Candy, Plane, Trains, and Automobiles.
I was gonna say, did you mention his best performance yet?
No, no. I mean that scene at the end at Steve Martin's house, like he doesn't do a lot, but it's enough. It's enough to get that point across. John Candy was a great facial actor,
Yeah.
especially in movies like The Great Outdoors when you see him go unhinged. John Candy plays unhinged so well.
His actually even going beyond the last scene in Plane, Trains, and Automobiles, like the scene when Neil's just yelling at him in the motel.
Hmm.
And then we get like I love how many different times we kind of see in almost unexpected times, like what's underneath Dell come out.
Hmm.
Because he does perfectly the annoying guy, like the way Neil sees him.
Hmm.
And then when like that real side, like the tragic side of him comes out, even though we
Hmm.
don't know till the end just how tragic it is, when we look back at the rest of the movie all over again, when we do know, it all makes sense.
Yeah.
And that's I mean, obviously Hughes's writing was great on that as well, but that really comes through in his performance also.
Yeah. I just think he's one of those actors that I hope never gets lost in time.
Yeah, that seems unlikely, thankfully. So
Yeah. Yeah. So
all
now
right.
we're into the top 10, the big
Yeah,
leagues.
I'm gonna adjust my lighter for a second. I don't know if that completely helps or not, but
Is this like whenever like you're watching Who Wants to Be a Millionaire and the surroundings get darker when they get to the triple or the six-figure questions?
I was kind of afraid it'd be the Seinfeld thing where it's like in one side of light I look fine, and the other side of light I look evil. I don't. All right. So we're doing top 10 now.
Yeah.
All right. Very happy with my number 10.
Okay.
My number 10 is John Lithgow.
Oh, good choice.
Now, of course, before we say anything, even though he started off, well, I want to say Garp was his first movie, which is kind of a comedic performance.
Mm-hmm.
It has dramatic beats in it. And then he immediately followed that up with Terms of Endearment, getting 2 Oscar nominations in a row, like right out of the gate. But I would be remiss if I didn't mention that the first thing I associate with John Lithgow would have to be Third Rock from the Sun.
Mm-hmm.
And what I really love about this is how many different things people can do that with. Because where I say I immediately think Third Rock from the Sun, somebody else might say Dexter.
Have you watched season 4 yet?
Yeah, I watched it individually and knew enough from what I'd seen in previous seasons partially to get all the side stories going on. But I was mainly concerned with seeing this performance I had heard so much about,
And
and the way they reveal things about that character gradually. Like I was surprised how much his inner nature is not that inner.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, like it's like you see him with his family and you're thinking, oh, he's got the facade of a loving husband, and it's like, oh, but he's the serial killer on the inside. And when we see him with his family, no, he's kind of always the serial killer.
So
But
what? So did the performance live up to the hype?
yeah, because I think that was such an unexpected thing to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
Because it would have been too obvious to make him seem like he was completely two sides, but to see that he was kind of trying to do the facade thing, but he was so evil, it was always creeping in,
Mm-hmm.
makes him even more unsettling that he couldn't even really hide it.
Mm-hmm.
um
He's
the,
always had. It's funny how many John Lithgow characters have had psychotic tendencies. I mean, look at Santa Claus the movie. He put nails in teddy bears.
yeah, and Raising Cain. He put Raising Cain's another case where he's playing so many different characters, some of which are real, some of which are not.
I haven't seen any of it, but I've heard he's great on The Crown too.
Yeah, I heard that also. I would probably know this if The Crown was like the kind of thing I would seek out,
Mm-hmm.
but like I'm on board with him enough that I might strictly just to see what his performance is like.
Mm-hmm.
But talking about Third Off from the Sun, when you think about like a comedic performance that just goes all out, and how he can do comedy like that, because Third Off from the Sun was a show that when you're a comedy that goes that long, eventually you run out of gas usually.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like Third Rock from the Sun was one of those rare shows that I don't remember those dry spots in it. I remember Third Rock from the Sun always being funny. And the fact that he was the head of that the whole time, and seeing the relationship between him and Joseph Gordon-Levitt now, like they just did an interview together recently, and Joseph Gordon-Levitt was talking about how like there are so many things that Gordon-Levitt has taken throughout his career in acting that he learned from John Lithgow during Third Rock from the Sun.
I'd like to think Joseph Gordon-Levitt was filming a scene for The Dark Knight Rises, and he was like, okay, how would John Lithgow do this?
And the fact that he can do comedy like that and be scary and do full on drama, and it's all seamless.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's never like you can't watch one John Lithgow thing because you saw another John Lithgow thing. Like even though Third Rock from the Sun is the first thing I think of, that never once bleeds into the Trinity Killer or anything else. Or he had a really great story I may be remembering this slightly. I have a vague memory of it, but as far as I remember it, he was talking about how, because it can get kind of tiresome. I mean, I get it, but it can get kind of tiresome when you hear actors talk about how I can't watch myself and all I
Mhm.
see are the mistakes, and I only watch my movies once, if not at all, not at all. And he was telling a story about the last time he saw Terms of Endearment, and it was on a plane, and he was like, I'll just watch this. Maybe nobody will catch me watching Terms of Endearment. And it was so refreshing because he's not an arrogant person at all.
Mhm.
He's like extremely humble and has like that warmth to him in real life. But he said at this particular time, in just kind of an epiphany moment, he was watching Terms of Endearment on a plane and just said to himself, "Wow, I am so good in this." It's like I love that he has the awareness to be able to say that, yet it doesn't sound arrogant at all. It's like he was surprised. He surprised himself with how good he was. I think he was specifically talking about the scene where he's like on the phone in the other room, and it's because he's really not in it that much.
I
But he,
sometimes forget that he's in it.
yeah, but
But
he
I
made
haven't
enough.
seen Terms of Endearment in years.
Yeah, because there's other things that stick out about that movie as well.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, apparently he stuck out enough to be able to get that back-to-back nomination after Garp. So yeah, so I mean, and Ricochet, just random movies like that. There was he did a thing on Jimmy Kimmel not that long ago where Kimmel plays this game where he'll read a line to an actor and they have to say if that's a line they've said in a movie or not.
Mhm.
And one of the lines was from Ricochet, and he missed it, and they showed him the clip from Ricochet without saying what the movie was, and his response was, "I don't even know what that is." It's crazy. It's crazy he did a Denzel movie and then doesn't recognize it on sight
Yeah.
because Ricochet is such an out there movie for both of them.
Yeah.
It's literally the credits on that movie go Denzel, John Lithgow, Ice-T. And I don't know about you, but I kind of love Ricochet, and I think a lot of that has to do with him.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's I think
There's a
that's
lot of stuff that you forgot to bring up for him too, because there's Cliffhanger. There's
that's gonna happen with a lot of these because a lot of these people have really extensive filmographies that are
Mhm.
incredible.
Yeah.
Where
There
they're
was
where they're
one
pushing.
on the tip of my tongue, and I forget what it was. Footloose.
Yeah. Did we say Harry and the Hendersons?
Yeah.
See, that's the thing is like every time you say a John Lithgow movie, it'll be entirely different from the last one you said.
It's so funny too because it's kind of like they say with wrestling, like usually the nicest guys are the ones that are the best bad guys. John Lithgow is one of the greatest assholes ever put to film.
Yeah.
Such a great asshole when that's what his character is supposed to be.
And if you would see him in real life, you would never ever suspect that.
No, you wouldn't. He even like no disrespect to he kind of even looks like he would be an asshole. Like,
he looks exactly like his character was in Footloose, is what he looks like
yeah,
he'd be in real life.
yeah, but it works, and he makes it work. My number 10 is one that had a heyday and then kind of went quiet and then had a resurgence. My number 10 is Michael Keaton.
Oh yeah.
And my argument for Michael Keaton is very simple. I believe it was either a 3 or 4 year span. You'll have to correct me. Beetlejuice, Batman, Pacific Heights.
I believe those were back to back to back, 88,
Look,
89, 90.
look at the range in just those three. Three completely different characters.
I believe Clean and Sober was in there as well.
Hmm. Yeah, and then you've got ridiculous stuff like Johnny Dangerously, which isn't a great movie, but he's fun in it.
Yeah.
And
And
with his resurgence, like it's so great to see him recognized for his talent now, thanks to Birdman.
yeah.
They have Birdman. He's he's the best version of one of the greatest superheroes of all time, and he's one of the best villains that the MCU put out. His Vulture is great.
It's also one of those cases where when you hear about the complaints people had about him being Batman at the time,
Hmm.
it's like before you really read up on that, it's like you've gotten so used to him in roles like that, you kind of forget for a minute that like Night Shift and Mr. Mom was what he was
Hmm.
in the early and mid '80s.
Yeah, and for me, I don't know if it's a nostalgia thing or what it is, but I rewatched Batman Returns because I watch it every December because Batman Returns is a Christmas movie. Shut up. Yes, it is.
Yeah, I do.
Um, and then I watched the Dark Knight trilogy, and when I was done, I was like, yeah, Keaton's still the Batman I would take every time.
Yeah,
And it's great too to see roles like the other guys where he still has the comedy chops.
yeah, yeah. Because we kind of dismissively brought up Night Shift and Mr. Mom just now, among others.
Hmm.
Like I remember Gung Ho being good, uh, but to just mention those doesn't mention the fact that he's brilliant at comedy.
Yeah,
I mean,
he's so funny.
I think the most front and center to that, apart from like Night Shift, would probably be Beetlejuice
Hmm.
because he does because manic comedy is hard to pull off without being annoying.
Hmm.
He is like one of the kings of manic comedy,
Yeah, I would agree with that.
and that's a short list of people that can really pull that off.
Hmm. And I hope his resurgence is here to stay. I hope we get to keep seeing him show off what he can do because I think until Birdman came out, he was always to me a very underrated actor.
Yeah,
I felt like he never got the attention he deserved.
somebody tried to put out a smear campaign or something during Birdman's Oscar run
Hmm.
where there were like mumblings about him being like really hard to work with or something,
Hmm.
kind of hindered his career pre Birdman.
Yeah.
I really don't know if those are true or not, but he does seem like he'd be very forward with like his methods and ideas.
Yeah.
So maybe that would clash or something. But yeah, we didn't even mention he's worked with Tarantino, which is
Hmm.
one of those things where if he hadn't yet, we'd be wishing for it every time.
Yeah. I'd like to see him do more. I'd love to see him pop up in like a Tarantino Western.
Oh yeah.
Would love to see. I'd love to see it be like a almost like a Henry Fonda and High Noon type role.
I mean, Once Upon a Time in the West.
Once Upon a Time in the West, yeah. High Noon's Gary Cooper,
Yeah,
but something
I
like
can.
this, something just like that oozes pure evil. And he's got a lot of stuff that flies under the radar. You have like Quicksand, White Noise, Jack Frost. Which say what you will about Jack Frost, the scenes when he's alive, I enjoy his presence.
Yeah,
Like the way that Keaton does it, it does make you kind of sad when he kicks the bucket.
yeah. That movie is not shit until he's a snowman.
Hmm.
And
No,
even then, it's like guilty pleasure shit.
yeah. I mean, and he can do evil too. I mean, we brought up Spider-Man: Homecoming. He's great in Desperate Measures.
Yeah, which is not very well liked, but I would still say underseen.
Yeah. So it's cool that he's recognized now, but I'd like to see more comedy and more Birdman type stuff because I've heard a lot of his stuff since like The Founder was kind of a letdown from what I understand. I haven't seen it.
Pretty. Any problem with the founder certainly isn't him, as you probably guessed.
Yeah. I've heard he's great in Spotlight.
Oh yeah, I think a lot of people have varied answers to this. I think he's MVP of Spotlight, and that's the high bar.
Yeah. So I'm glad that he's popular again and getting work again because I enjoy seeing him work.
I'll be interested to see his little crossover into that movie Jared Leto's doing,
Hmm.
like the MCU thing.
Yeah.
So it's cool to see that he's getting like these really big paycheck movies, but can still kind of do the prestige projects also.
Hmm.
So he's pretty much found the perfect balance with that at this point.
Yeah. He's gotten. I don't know if he's kind of eased on how he is to work with or what, but his selection's a lot better now than it used to be.
Yeah. Well,
And it's nice to see a good actor like that be in good movies.
yeah, because Birdman probably put him on a lot of radars, and then the fact that he did Birdman and Spotlight back to back probably doubled that.
I don't know if he changed agents or what, but whatever he was doing 2014 to 2015, keep it up.
And something else we didn't mention that was kind of supposed to be his return to kind of prestige projects was Game 6.
Yeah.
I remember there was like rumblings with critics that that was going to be his big comeback, and then just kind of nothing came of it.
Hmm.
It's like maybe that was the area where he was struggling to work with people. I don't know. Like I said, we don't even know if that stuff's true or not. So
No. Which is funny because we've both seen Game 6, and Game 6 is pretty decent.
yeah, it's definitely a showcase for him too.
Yeah. Downey's great in it too.
Yeah. So is that
That's all I have to say about that.
all right? My number 9.
Hmm.
All right, we're going back to the past. Now we're going to talk about James Cagney, I think,
Okay.
who's another person that's kind of known for kind of one thing specifically, but had a whole bunch of things he was doing. Obviously, when you think of him, the first thing you think of is like the gangster movies, like The
Mhm.
Public Enemy and Angels with Dirty Faces. And White Heat's not like a gangster movie, but he kind of plays us kind of the same kind of character. Just to put it in simpler terms, the nuances of these characters is where the meat of this really is. But when you have stuff like The Public Enemy, where you have scenes like when he walks straight into the camera, or one of the most famous scenes in movie history when he's talking to his girlfriend and she's kind of hinting at the fact that maybe he'd rather have another woman because he's just kind of complaining about her, saying like he wishes she was a wishing well so that he could put her in a bucket and sink her or something like that.
Mhm.
Uh, and when she just kind of he's doing this whole time, and when she just says just one little thing like, something about you have other choices, or why don't you just look for somebody else, he picks up half of a grapefruit and just smashes it into her face. And it's like one of the most famous scenes in movie history, and it's incredible. But my personal favorite was always Angels with Dirty Faces, where he had and you can see this in White Heat also. But not in White Heat, he's kind of like goes deeper and deeper into the psycho aspects of the character. Whereas in Angels with Dirty Faces, he's ruthless, but he's kind of got this ambiguous, will he come around to the light or not kind of thing. And the last scene of Angels with Dirty Faces is like one of the peaks of his career, and he's not even fully on screen for it. It's when he's being executed, and
Spoilers.
he's kind of befriended this group of boys, like young kids, and the priest is really trying to say to him, like, if you go in there and get executed stoically, it's gonna leave like, a bad impression. You have to be scared of the consequences, basically. And then there's like this whole ambiguous thing of when he gets in there, we only see like his arm occasionally and like his shadow, but when he's brought into the room with the electric chair, he like freaks the fuck out. And it's like it's this ambiguous thing of, was he doing that because he was actually melting down, or was he doing that for the facade of he had regrets and faced the consequences and stuff like that. And it's really powerful stuff. But when you get to like White Heat, where his character is just really off his damn rocker, when he gets like he like gets migraines, and he's like fixated on his mom, and then he's basically doing like the full ham thing. Like you'll notice, like Pesci, Scorsese characters, a lot of them seem to stem from Cagney.
Hmm.
And so he's kind of doing the going full ham thing and being like really terrifying, even though he's obviously in stature, he was kind of always the smallest dude in the room, but he was also the scariest and the most unpredictable. But then there's a moment like halfway through White Heat when he eventually gets arrested and gets put in prison. And it's like prison, and you would think like, is he going to find redemption in prison or something like that? But no, the psychosis of his character gets more subtle. Like, instead of it being like, oh, he's gonna go, really over the top and be really scary on the outside, and then prison on the inside. No, it's not really that prison makes him meek. It's that he gets to basically wallow in his own fucking craziness. And then he eventually breaks out, and we get our massive finale that you've probably seen a clip of in one form or another when he's at the when he's on like the tanks and he says, "Made it, ma, top of the world," and then blows himself up.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like he was so perfect when you look at the Public Enemy or Angels with Dirty Faces or White Heat, playing these characters that like think they're unstoppable, but eventually reach like a massive downfall. Like the ending of the Public Enemy is so fucking haunting. When like his whole family is like having a gathering for dinner and they're all waiting for him, and there's a knock at the door and they go to answer it, like his whole family answers the door waiting to see him with open arms, and just his murdered body just drops into the doorway. And it's like that scene is fucking haunting. It's like they all reach this giant downfall. But on the other side of that now, you have stuff like his Oscar winning role in Yankee Doodle Dandy, where he got to show off that he's like this massive musical talent, whether it be singing or dancing or whatever, and he could do that thing. There's a scene at the end of Yankee Doodle Dandy that's kind of amazing if you know the backstory. And it's he's kind of getting older now, and like everything in the movie is now the past, and like all the people he's loved have gone on, and he's at like this stairway. It's kind of a big stairway, and instead of walking down the stairs, he just kind of slightly dances down the stairs. And the thing about that is, obviously, that would be something that have to be like a really carefully choreographed kind of thing, right? Because dancing on the stairs is pretty. Not everybody can do that.
Right.
Apparently, that was pretty much unplanned and improvised. Like it's like they decided like right before cameras were rolling, I think I'm gonna dance down the steps instead. And he just did that, like unplanned and stuff like. And then there's stuff like the emotional aspect of the character when he gets his big emotional scene, but it's not big in the way you would expect. It's like because Walter Houston's playing his dad, and his dad's on his deathbed. But prior to this, when they were all performing together as a family, they do their whole big thing, and then this is another line you might be familiar with just from hearing it around. It was what is the whole thing now? My father thanks you, my mother thanks you, my sister thanks you, and I thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And they would say that like after every big performance. And now he's with his dad on his deathbed, and that line is said in such this triumphant manner of saying, you know, thank you for coming out and seeing us or whatever. It's this big exit line, and it's always said with kind of a bit of a triumph. And it's like, now imagine the exact same line, and it's the very last thing he says to his dad right before his dad dies. It just kind of imagine how different the delivery is. But it's and stuff like that. That scene alone is probably what got him the Oscar. And then he's in a slew of just kind of forgettable movies throughout his career, but he is like easily one of the most magnetic presences of all time. Like he is such a magnetic presence. The line he's most known for, the "you dirty rat" thing,
Mm-hmm.
he never even said that in a movie.
Hmm.
He there's one line in one movie where he kind of is almost saying it, but it's like that's always when I feel like you know when you've made it is like you're constantly put with a line that you didn't say, but just your presence is so well known that it kind of speaks for that line that was never actually said. And he was able to do like he got another nomination down the line for a movie called Love Me or Leave Me, which was kind of the combination of these two things where he got to play a criminal again, but the movie was also a musical. So that kind of felt like a nice bit of full circle. But yeah, and then later down the road he was in, when he was much older, he was in stuff like Ragtime and stuff like that. But yeah, pretty much every time he's in a movie, I'll watch that movie just for him and his presence, even if the movie itself, like stuff here and there, like something to sing about or Here Comes the Navy or stuff like that. Movies I've seen that I just don't remember anything about, but I remember being drawn to him specifically throughout. Um, Mr. Roberts isn't a forgettable movie, but he's one of the main things I take away from it, and that's a movie that Jack Lemmon won an Oscar for.
Hmm.
But Cagney's kind of always one of the first places I go, if not the first place I go when I think of one of his movies. So he'll always be up there towards the top.
Okay. Well, let's shift gears from James Cagney. We've gotten to do this a couple times already, but I want to do it again. For number 9, I want to talk about Steve Martin.
All right.
I think Steve Martin is one of the best comedic actors that's ever walked the earth. I love his style of comedy. I think he is probably one that you thought of on your short list with Keaton as great at manic comedy.
Yeah. I like how many comedic actors are on yours.
Mm-hmm.
Because
comedic actors don't get enough love.
Yeah, because I feel like pretty much anybody would like. It's a very common sentiment that comedy is harder than drama.
Yeah, and the fact that like I love Steve Martin's brand of comedy. I love that he goes over the top, but not in a way that people go over the top now. Like, for example, comedies today, something that's considered, there's a lot of gross out humor. And you won't find that in Steve Martin's repertoire. You won't find it. You find clever dialogue, funny delivery, great expressions, really fun physical comedy. That's where Steve Martin lives.
Not to mention situational comedy, especially since he's written a lot of his stuff.
Yeah. And there's just a lot of, Steve Martin's another one. You could just start listing off things. You and I have already talked about The Jerk, The Man with Two Brains. You've got Three Amigos. And then you do have some over the top stuff, like he's the bad guy in Looney Tunes Back in Action. Like, it's just so random. But then it's also nice, like you watch a movie like Bringing Down the House, another movie that's not very well liked, but Steve Martin he has comedic lines in it, but for the most part, he's a straight man.
Yeah.
And he does that really well too. One of my favorite Steve Martin performances actually is one of the ones that he's really one of the most subdued. I think Steve Martin's really good and It's Complicated.
Yeah.
I think he's great in that movie. And there's not a whole lot of Steve Martin going on, except maybe the scene where they get high. Outside of that, it's very toned down Steve Martin, but he's great in it.
Yeah, that's a cliche that he's handled really well, because you talk about Bringing Down the House and It's Complicated, and it's like in both movies he has that cliche scene where he's kind of the more uptight character that eventually gets loose, because there's the scene where they get high and It's Complicated, and there's also the scene in Bringing Down the House where he gets like drunk.
Yeah.
And even though it's such a cliche, the way he does, like the scene in Bring Down the House where he's drunk is probably my favorite scene in the movie.
Mm-hmm. And there's other great stuff too. Like I love Steve Martin is also great at thinking he's the straight man. Like his character thinks he's the straight man and he's not. Bowfinger comes to mind. Like his character thinks he's so straight laced, but he's not. I love Bowfinger. Bowfinger brings me so much joy.
Yeah, I was so glad we got to talk.
I enjoy the shit out of Bowfinger.
And full credit to him because he wrote it.
Yeah, another one right there.
And there's times where he's tried his hand at drama, like Pennies from Heaven. He tried musical,
Mm-hmm.
and then we had stuff like A Simple Twist of Fate, which really isn't that great, but I like the way he was always willing to branch out. Shop Girl is a movie I really love. He wrote that too.
Mm-hmm.
And
another movie where he's the straight man and works really well at it. Let's bring it back. Planes, Trains, and Automobiles.
Yep. That's the brilliant thing about Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, is it's kind of like they get the chance to go back and forth. Like whenever Dell's being the funny character, Neil's there to be the straight man. Whenever Neil starts to go over the top, Dell kind of takes on the straight man part and kind of lets him go.
Which I think works really well for Martin and Candy, because you could have reversed those roles and probably got a similar result as far as enjoyment.
Yeah.
I think they're fine the way they are. I wouldn't change a thing. But if you told me that John Candy was a straight man and Steve Martin was the annoying over the top character, I believe you.
Yeah, because we kind of had a similar debate like this when we talked about Candy and Aykroyd in The Great Outdoors.
Mm-hmm.
Was it's not always easy to tell which one's the straight man and which one's the comedic one
Mm-hmm.
because they flip back and forth so easily.
Mm-hmm. You see that a lot too in Dirty Rotten Scoundrels.
Yeah, I talked about Dirty Rotten Scoundrels somewhat recently when I was talking about its godforsaken remake, and just about the fact that Steve Martin is a comedian that just cannot be imitated.
Yeah.
Like you can't try to do Steve Martin. Like when you even if like when you see like hear people like doing impressions, nobody has a Steve Martin impression because nobody can do Steve Martin but him, and you can't try to do his type of comedy because here's the thing. I was like, if you were to show somebody now like Steve Martin's old stand up,
Mm-hmm.
they would probably have no idea what they were looking at or why it's funny.
Mm-hmm.
He's one of those people where you're basically on his wavelength or you're not
Yeah.
with his comedy goes.
It is, especially when he's working with Rob Reiner.
Yeah,
Or not Rob Reiner, Carl Reiner. God,
there's
my
a
mind would just
great
leak there for a
bit.
minute.
I can't remember if I mentioned this before. I might have in like our Bowfinger video or something, or maybe our The Jerk video. His appearance on Johnny Carson. Did we talk
Mm-hmm.
about that?
No.
When he did the thing where you know how celebrities like on old talk shows would do that thing where it's like, well, they have to get going, they have to go do another thing, so and then they say their goodbyes or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And Steve Martin said, well, they did a whole interview, and then Steve Martin said, all right, well, I've got to go. I've got, a place to be. I got another thing to do. And then they did a whole goodbye thing, and he like waved to the crowd, and then he went behind the curtain. And then Carson acted like he was getting ready to go, like continue. And then Steve Martin came back out weeping and said, I don't have anywhere to go. Everybody's always saying they got to go this place or that place. I'm not going anywhere.
Steve Martin also, like, he's retired now. And in a way, I'm kind of glad because I would hate to see him get sucked into the kind of comedy that we have today. And I don't think his comedy would be appreciated now as much as it was then.
Yeah. I remember talking about one specific moment when I talked about Looney Tunes back in action.
Mm-hmm.
It's like basically trying to put his type of comedy in the comedies of today, like you were just saying.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like there's just one moment, and I don't know what it is about it. Like I said, that's the thing with Martin's comedy is there's no point trying to explain it, like why it works.
Mm-hmm.
But there's the moment where he's doing the thing where he keeps unzipping himself, and he's like other people in disguise.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's that segment where he's doing that, but he's got that big safari hat, and he can't reach the zipper, so he's just doing this. And he's like, I can't reach because of the hat. And it's like that is such a Steve Martin bit.
It is.
uh, it's like the fact that they were able to insert that is like something you probably could do less and less with movies like they are now. I guess I really hate to do that thing where it's like they don't make them like this now. But in his particular case, it's just hard to insert that without like him kind of in complete control.
Yeah, because I mean, you see with like Cheaper by the Dozen, he was transitioned into more to like a family comedy type role. But if you look at his stuff in the 70s and 80s, he was freaking hilarious in his heyday. Still is. Like, whenever I hear that he's made an appearance somewhere, I try to find it on YouTube because he's a funny guy. He is so funny.
And what I think it's very brief. It's so brief. He's credited as special appearance by.
Mm-hmm.
I've mentioned this before, but I'll mention it again. My all-time favorite Steve Martin performance is Little Shop of Horrors. He has to be funny. He has to be a villain, and it's a musical. And he takes all of these things to another level. The scene with him and Bill Murray is gold. His dentist number is incredible. Like that's one of those cases where every time you look up like amateur productions of Little Shop of Horrors, most of the people that are playing Orin Scrivello are just doing Steve Martin. Like they're not even trying to put their own spin on it because it's just like he did it so perfectly. That's just your immediate thought of, even though this character is very interpretable through all these different versions,
Mm-hmm.
like it just feels like that's the character, what Steve Martin was doing, which
Yeah.
I believe was a different interpretation from what like the show was, and obviously what the original movie was.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think that'll always probably be my favorite performance of his. I think. Did I throw Billy Lynn out there? Another time he took a shot at drama.
Mm-mm.
Which might have been one of the last movies he was in before announcing that he was kind of slowing down. But I thought he was I liked that movie more than a lot of people did,
Hmm.
and I liked him in it. And I think part of it was I just love the idea of him taking on a role like that.
Hmm.
I thought he was genuinely good in it also. But like I said, there's a lot of things that I thought were genuinely good about that movie that most people didn't. So maybe that's just me.
Hmm. And I love how he's not afraid to do other things too. Like he made his appearances in Fantasia 2000. He's worked with the Muppets before. Like I love how much he's willing to and worked with the Looney Tunes. I love how he's like he knows where he's good, but he's not afraid to try other things and expand what he's doing. Even if
did
it doesn't always work, I respect the attempt. And if Steve Martin comes and says, "Hey, I have this project I'm doing," I'll always pay attention to what it is.
did you see his video that went viral towards the beginning of the pandemic?
No.
Well, you know how a lot of celebrities kind of tried to do a "Hey, we're all in this together" thing, and it kind of kept backfiring.
Yeah.
People are like, "Who the fuck are you talking to? You rich
Mhm.
pieces of shit." Like Gal Gadot tried to do the Imagine thing, and people were like, "What the hell is this fake shit?"
Mhm.
Pretty much right after the Imagine thing, where everybody was like, "They don't care about anybody else. Like they're in their mansions, they're doing just fine. They're pretending to care so that we will still love them." And
Mhm.
people got really, really mad. And shortly after that, Steve Martin posted a video on Twitter, and all it was it just said something along the lines of, "Thought you guys might be able to use this." And it's just like 3 minutes of him just standing in the woods playing the banjo without saying anything. And
Mhm.
all the responses were like, "Yes, this is what we need." It was serious too. It was like really relaxing and like comforting.
Mhm.
It was like, because obviously, yeah, we didn't even mention him as a musician. Like,
Yeah. The dude's multi-talented.
it's like no wonder one of his best roles, to me, his best role was in a musical.
Yeah. And how many times has he hosted the Oscars?
Quite a few. He's got some of my favorite jokes also.
There's a reason they keep having him come back.
Ugh. I bet he'd kill it again, but he's probably done doing it.
Yeah,
Well,
but
they seem to be done having hosts in general. So,
I'd love to hear some of his jokes about some of the things that are going on these days. I would
how,
love it.
how long did he and Martin Short's show go?
I'm
Because
not sure.
that was pretty recent.
Yeah. They made it into a Netflix special.
Yeah, I kept meaning to watch that, and I still haven't.
I don't think it's on Netflix anymore. I haven't seen it because I wanted to watch it too and just never did.
Of course, they
Because
would do.
for some reason, like I like Martin Short, fine, but unless he's sewn to Steve Martin, he loses a little bit when he gets out on his own. You end up
It,
with Clifford and Santa Claus 3 and
movie wise,
Simple Wish and things like that.
movie wise, I would agree. Like if you watch like his talk show appearances, they are Martin Short is like one of the sharpest people alive.
I saw one of his shows live when I was in school, remember? I
I
filled out
think
the
I did.
program for it. That was fantastic.
Yeah. And it's like
Like
he's
If
so
Martin Short's gonna be funny on a stage. If you're gonna be funny in a movie, go find Steve Martin.
yeah, like that thing that Robin Williams was known for, like the riffing, where like
Hmm.
you could just give him one thing and suddenly he'll just run off with it. Martin Short is also like a genius with that. So is that Steve Martin in a nutshell?
Yeah.
All right. My number eight's kind of a downer.
Okay.
Somebody we lost way too early and has a really tragic story, but is undeniably one of the greatest actors to ever live. My number eight is Montgomery Clift.
Okay.
I don't know how.
That's so weird because the way you were saying that, I thought you were describing my number 8.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So to talk about him, obviously he's one of those cases where his personal life gets brought up just as much as his acting career. But to put the focus on his acting career, he had like a 1-2 punch here in 1948 to just immediately start off with, where he had Red River, the John Wayne movie.
Mm-hmm.
And what's great about Red River was never a movie that I fell in love with the way most people did. But it's most notable because you can clearly see him like breaking out. Where like you have him who's just starting out, and you have John Wayne who is already a veteran by this point. Even in 48, he was already a veteran because of all his Lone Star Westerns. But the idea of him basically having to prove himself and like match this legend that was next to him. And it's like, even if John Wayne wasn't the best actor, it's the presence that you're matched up against, which is exactly what Wayne was.
Mm-hmm.
And like through that whole movie, when you see their characters clashing, it's like just watching it as a whole thing of somebody who's just starting up and the veteran, and somebody being able to put themselves in this place that they deserve as an actor, and then to immediately follow that up with The Search, which might be one of my personal favorite performances of his. I hesitate because I'm wondering if it might be my favorite performance of his, where he's playing the soldier that comes across this kid that just escaped from a concentration camp. And it's basically this really, as dark as the subject matter is and as tear jerking as the movie is, when the two of them are together, when he's teaching it's a very lighthearted movie between the two of them, where he's like teaching the kid English and like to say yes, like he gives him candy if he says yes or no correctly. And like this whole bond forms, and it's like it's the whole thing of the adult bonds with the child thing. But he just does it so naturally, that it's like I said, the combination of the lightheartedness of it and like the darkness of it and where it's coming from, and then eventually the ending. It's this real emotional powerhouse of a movie, and that really stands a lot on him. It was his first Oscar nomination in leading, and it's I could go on about that, but then obviously he got more well known with movies like From Here to Eternity. Is probably what I would say is probably what he's most famous for, if I had to guess. Like that's just a case where it depends on the person you talk to. But obviously he's also known for his team ups with Elizabeth Taylor, who he was like best friends with. Where they did A Place in the Sun, which was a really dark character for him, and Suddenly Last Summer. Suddenly Last Summer is wild. Like Suddenly Last Summer is fucking insane. And then like it's Elizabeth Taylor and Hepburn is basically to cover something up. Hepburn is trying to get Elizabeth Taylor lobotomized, and he's the doctor. And it's basically like it's a Tennessee Williams thing, and it's insane. I highly recommend it. And they also did Raintree County, which is like one of those big sprawling kind of movies that I only remember for like the cinematography. But the thing though is that I tend to lump his performance in The Heiress and A Place in the Sun kind of together, because they're kind of they both kind of have this conniving quality to them, but there's also kind of not exactly an ambiguity. But there's a long time in movies where you're not quite sure where his character is going. But there's also the case where it's like he could have like a really slimy nature or just a really dark nature in general. Where like in The Heiress, he could just be like a gold digger. But in A Place in the Sun, it's leading to a potential murder. And like just kind of see him, he's one of those actors where if he just kind of puts on a particular face, you can kind of see all of his wheels turning, but not his actor wheels turning, like the character's wheels turning. But the thing about that is, even when he had like those really dark characters, there was always like an underlying sort of sensitivity to him. Like even though it wasn't known at the time, obviously, that his life would go a tragic direction early in his career, it's one of those cases where watching it back, it almost just kind of seems inevitable. Because it just kind of seems like there's some kind of sadness in there somewhere. Because there was the whole thing, because obviously in his personal life, there was a whole thing about his sexuality was a big topic, where it's like, was he gay or was he bi or what was going on? And then he had a whole bunch of health problems. He had what was it, like colitis and dysentery for most of his life. He had like a whole bunch of drinking and drug problems. And on top of all this, right around the time they were making Raintree County, he got into a car accident where he had to have plastic surgery, and it just completely, like, he looked like maybe 20 years older. But the thing was all this kind of added to like some of his performances. Like when you think of Judgment at Nuremberg was like a big moment because you have all this tragedy behind him also, and all these things that just seem to be going wrong. And it was at a place where he was like, from what I heard, when he showed up on the set of Judgment and Nuremberg, like before he had like the really classic good looks and like all the women were fawning all over him. Apparently, when he showed up on the set of Judgment in Nuremberg, people were kind of scared of him, or at least startled by his appearance, because he was like, I guess his alcoholism was like out in the open by that point, and so he was like drinking vodka like on the set just openly, and he had been starting to try to cut his own hair at the time, so that was kind of uneven, and he just looked like wild, and he didn't know his lines at all. So he has two scenes at Judgment in Nuremberg, both of which are long, about 10 minutes each, where he's on the stand being questioned. And eventually he's going to crack. So basically what he did was, instead of trying to remember his lines, because there was just no way he was going to remember them, he just kind of like he got the vibe of the scene and then just ad-libbed and got them there. And it's like whatever he was saying was making sense in the scene. And it was Stanley Kramer was the director, and he basically just kind of said, like, hardly any of his portion of the script is in there, but that's exactly the performance I wanted. And it's that, if The Search isn't my favorite performance of his, that one is. And it's like, to think that that's the background into that is incredible what you see here. And it ended up getting him another nomination. To the point that, honestly, that was when George Chakiris won for West Side Story. And I was big of a West Side Story fan as anybody, but I will forever be baffled that Chakiris beat him somehow. I don't know how that happened. Except, I mean, obviously, you know, West Side Story was kind of a juggernaut, that Oscar ceremony. But that one's baffling to me. I have no idea how he didn't walk away with it with that. And like maybe it would have come off as like, you know, sympathy votes or something, but it would have absolutely been earned without question. But it did eventually get worse because he went on to do a movie where he played Sigmund Freud, which was one of his last movies. And the story about that, well, it's not one of his best performances, I don't think, as meaty as the role probably sounds. But because his health problems were so bad that they were holding up the shooting, the studio tried to sue him. The studio tried to sue him because he had health problems. But then, of course, Freud came out and was like a massive hit. And they said, you know, it's a massive hit because it was him. So instead of him getting sued going anywhere, he ended up winning a settlement instead. So all that, and then it got to the point where he went out swinging. His last movie was a movie called The Defector, and there's stunts in it where like he's diving into rivers and shit. And even despite where he was with all of his health problems and the fact that he was so near death, he insisted on doing his own stunts. So it's like he went out swinging. Like I said, when you look at this and you see like the underlying sensitivity and the sadness and all this, with like just knowing that tragedy is coming, like there's a lot of comparisons to him and James Dean, despite the fact that Clift had a much larger filmography. To my understanding, James Dean like idolized him, which kind of makes it even eerier.
Yeah.
And I think the first time I ever saw Clift in a movie was, if it wasn't From Here to Eternity, it was probably I Confess. Actually, I'm almost certain it was I Confess, the Hitchcock movie with him and Carl Malden. And even though Carl Malden's kind of the showcase in that movie, there was something about him where I was like, why do I get the feeling this, like, I hadn't heard of him when I saw I Confess, but it was like, I feel like he's a big deal. Like I just had this feeling. And it's one of his more, it's not near as on the radar as some of these other movies. But that's, yeah. So he also did a movie called Lonely Hearts, which is really nice. But yeah, so I think that's pretty much him. Like I said, I hate that his personal life is kind of as famous as his acting career, because he really was one of the greats, even in such a short amount of time. He was he was only 45 when he died, and I think it ended up being something with his heart. I think like not quite a heart attack, but something in that vein, like something with a carotid artery or something.
Mm.
But yeah, so that's a downer. But the fact that his performances still live on and he's still considered like one of the greats ever is, yes, his legacy, all the positive stuff regarding his legacy should be, as big as ever. So that's pretty much where I stand with him, I think.
Okay. My number 8 is somebody that also died, and we came to find out that they had a kind of a tragic personal life going, but this one wasn't nearly as public till after the fact. My number 8 has had a lot of lows in his career, but the highs are just too high to ignore. My number 8 is Robin Williams. Another trip down nostalgia lane. A lot of us grew up with a Robin Williams movie of some kind, whether it was Aladdin or Mrs. Doubtfire or something along those lines. I know it's a cliche that Robin Williams gives a lot of like monologue-y speeches in his movies, especially about being different. But I can't help it. Like when Robin Williams starts monologuing, I want to hear what he has to say. Even though I pretty much know what it's going to be, I want to hear him say it. And I think thanks to Aladdin, I think Robin Williams kind of changed the landscape of voice acting.
Yeah.
Before Genie, can you think of any other movie that like the voice acting was like a showpiece?
Not to that extent.
No.
Because like I said,
I mean, there's been a lot of good ones. Like if you want to stick with Disney, Vincent Price in The Great Mouse Detective is great.
Yeah, there back in the day there was stuff like Vincent Price in The Great Mouse Detective or George Sanders in The Jungle Book where it was like they modeled the animation after how he was performing it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there was I think it's the way the genie is able to transform into whatever he's doing,
Mm-hmm.
was able to gave it the room to where they could do anything with it.
Mm-hmm.
And then
And I think he should get a lot of credit for that. And even when he went into drama, it didn't always work. Like he had a good dramatic beat. Like it didn't, when he was being dramatic, it didn't always feel forced, like it does with a lot of comedic actors. But I thought there were some times he pulled off drama pretty decently. He pulled off eerie way better than I think anybody expected. When you look at Insomnia and 1 Hour Photo, I don't think anybody expected that.
I remember, well, I don't. It could have been anything, but we went to see something in that 2002 area. And this may have been, I can't remember which came out first between 1 Hour Photo and Insomnia, but because they were the same year. But I remember when we saw the trailer for Insomnia, when it's revealed in the middle of the trailer that he's the one that Pacino's haunting, there was like an audible reaction in the theater.
Yeah, I remember that. And it's wild, absolutely wild to think of everything that Nolan's done and knowing that the film that put Nolan on the map, he worked with fucking Robin Williams. It's crazy.
Well, technically that might have been Memento, but as far as like mainstream,
Mm-hmm.
because Memento was kind of small at the time it came out, but I remember Insomnia was like people saw it.
Yeah, they did. And I enjoyed seeing him on the screen. I mean, he's made a lot of not so great choices, but some of them knocked it out of the park. I mean, World's Greatest Dad is great. It's kind of got this cloud over it now, though, with everything that we know. But he's still great in it. Even when he's doing like smaller, less scale voice acting, like when he was Fender, I couldn't think of his name, in Robots. He's even fun in that. I've always really liked Robin Williams. We grew up on Mrs. Doubtfire.
Yeah, that's kind of the thing too. Was when you talk about kind of like what we were talking about with Lithgow, his
Mm-hmm.
co-star. Where it's like he's another one of those cases where you could mention like 5 or 6 different Robin Williams movies, and they're all from like a different aspect of his filmography.
Yeah.
Like how you got like his Oscar stuff, like well, obviously this would fall more into other categories besides Oscar stuff, but just to make it simpler, like The Fisher King, Dead
Mm-hmm.
Poets Society, Good Morning Vietnam,
Mm-hmm.
obviously Good Will Hunting, his win.
Yeah.
And then you've got some of the in his later years, like in those last couple of years, he was in kind of some weird, like that was when the drama stuff wasn't really kind of working. Like I always hate how much of a high he didn't go out on.
Yeah.
There was a lot of shit there that he kind of seemed to do at the last minute that, yeah, I don't know, but I think it was also the filmmakers behind a lot of those movies weren't very like inspired.
Mm-hmm.
Like he wasn't working with as big of names after a while, like towards the end there. And then there's this middle portion when, like I said, it was like his family stuff kind of took over. Like you said, we grew up on Mrs. Doubtfire. I remember vividly seeing Jumanji in the theater and how big of a deal that was.
Mm-hmm.
Like by the time we got to Flubber, because we look back on Flubber now as like a Flubber exists, but I remember whenever he in that mid 90s area when we were growing up and we were kids and he was doing movies like that, he was another one of those people where every movie he did was kind of an event.
Yeah.
Like there was it may seem like a nothing thing now, but I remember when Flubber was a big deal.
Oh yeah.
It was brief, but I remember it vividly. And it was always because he was the star. Like that was the draw.
Mm-hmm. His
And it's like,
name was all over the posters. His face was all over the posters.
and to think that he had that for a while, because usually it's like when you think of actors going into like more family friendly movies is what their downfall is considered.
Mm-hmm.
Like Eddie Murphy is often grouped in there, but the thing about that is that those it could be a nostalgia thing, but I mean those work because even with the new ones out, I'll still always vastly prefer his Jumanji.
Yeah.
And also Mrs. Doubt, like people talk about, Mrs. Doubtfire being creepy now, but I don't know that that was ever not the case.
Mm-hmm.
But it's because that movie still, is really powerful, like dramatically. It kind of like how realistically the marriage and the divorce is portrayed.
Mm-hmm.
Is
And the
like,
fact that the movie doesn't end with them getting back together. They stay divorced.
yeah, that's a
That was a
big
big deal at the
deal.
time. Because usually, the formula for that would be, he's found out, Sally Field forgives him. They say, hey, let's give it another go. And I think what helps with that is the fact that his foil in that movie, I put foil in quotations, is Pierce Brosnan. And Pierce Brosnan's not a bad guy in that movie.
Instead of,
Their last scene together ends in a handshake.
I was gonna say, you expect a confrontation, and instead of a confrontation, one saves the other's life.
Yeah. I mean, granted, it's from a mess that he created, but
Yeah.
and it's not like Stu even shakes his hand. Stu's Pierce Brosnan in the movie, of course. He even shakes his hand back. It's very brief and very quick, but I mean, he does return the handshake. This was after he's been exposed for lying and been hanging around the house breaking the law.
It's like Brosnan's just so happy to be alive. He doesn't even really acknowledge, oh, you were okay.
Yeah. And one of my favorite little lines that sometimes gets missed is when he hits Pierce Brosnan in the back of the head with a fruit, and he just says, "It was run by fruiting." like that line sounds like it'd be awful, but the way that Williams delivers it in the atmosphere of the scene is hilarious.
I like to think that was Stu's like first impression was like, oh yes, my life has been saved, and it's like, oh, he was Mrs. Doubtfire the whole time. Oh, so much makes sense now. The run by fruiting, yeah, it's all coming together now.
That was after he shook his hand on the car ride home. I still kind of wonder to this day what that car ride home was like, if they just all just rode home in silence.
I'm sure they made Daniel hitch a ride with somebody else. With Robert Prosky, probably.
Probably, yeah. Well, yeah, because they had to talk about the TV show that ended up being at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
it's
he's
just
another one that did so much. I'm trying to think if there's anything we didn't touch on that's like major.
for him.
Yeah.
His is another one of those that his list of movies that he hasn't done and was considered for is almost more interesting than what he did do.
I know he really wanted to be in one of Nolan's Batman movies,
Yeah.
which we all kind of thought would happen because of Insomnia, but
Yeah, but Warner Brothers just kept pissing him off. But I just, and like you brought up, Dead Poet Society, Good Morning Vietnam, like when he had the right script to work with, when he would go from comedic and had to put like a dramatic bent on it, if he had a good script to work with it, he could pull it off well. And even in movies where the script wasn't that great, you could tell that he was really trying to without forcing it, make it feel like, hey, this, what happened is dramatic. We need to address this in a serious way.
And it was always really obvious when he would especially mesh with the material.
Mm-hmm.
Like with his style, the way it was, and just sort of free nature of how he would just kind of do whatever,
Mm-hmm.
made him feel absolutely perfect for the chaotic world of Terry Gilliam in the Fisher King.
Mm-hmm.
Like, can you imagine anybody else in the Fisher King in that particular part?
No.
And everybody, and the thing about it too was this wasn't just a sort of post-death thing like often happens.
Mm-hmm.
Even when he was still living, but also a lot after his death, was all the stories that came out about how much everybody loved working with him.
Yeah.
Like the kids on Mrs. Doubtfire have a lot of great stories. Like Mara Wilson in particular has told a few Robin Williams stories that are really good.
Mm-hmm.
And Jeff Bridges had a great one about working on the Fisher King with him.
Mm-hmm. It's one of those cases that like he was also one of those that when he passed, you could tell like how much effect he had on people's lives. Like his was one of those celebrity deaths that real people felt.
Yeah.
I mean, that says a lot about somebody.
There's still, and today even, because a lot of people like to pretend that they're badasses and say like, I don't care when celebrities die or whatever because I don't know them or whatever.
Yeah.
But like every time a big one dies now, I almost always see the comment, this is the celebrity death that has affected me the most besides Robin Williams.
Yeah.
It's like every time it's besides Robin Williams.
It's crazy. There's still so many times that I'm like browsing Reddit and somebody's like drew a picture of a true legend and they're still drawing pictures of Robin Williams.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. And I will still stick with what I said. With the current events of the world, God, I wish he was still alive to still do stand up.
Yeah, because he was always all over current events.
And boy, would he have a whole plate full to work with right now. A whole plate full. Because, I mean, on one hand, we were saying that, from 2016 on, but now we have the pandemic on top of it. He could do a whole special on Trump jokes and COVID jokes. He could do an entire hour and a half on just those two things.
And then there was the whole thing where, have you seen the video where he was performing for the military? And they had
No, but I think I've heard about this.
I can't remember what it's called now, but it's a thing where they all kind of had to turn around.
Mm-hmm.
And then he just had to stop in the middle of his act and kind of use like the context clues.
Mm-hmm.
So he like took his hat off and did like the whole thing and like took it really seriously. And then when it finished and they all turned back to the stage, he immediately turned that into a bit. And he's like, can you imagine how scary it was to see you all just completely turn the other way? Like, no, fuck this guy.
The man is definitely on the Mount Rushmore. He might have 2 or 3 of the heads on Mount Rushmore for improv comedy.
Yeah.
The man could improvise like nothing else. I mean, they had to animate Aladdin around him because he could improvise so well. And the fact that he could do that and it didn't piss off the creators of Aladdin and they embraced it says a lot about how he approached things. And
Yeah,
it's very sad, and it's a very sad irony that somebody that was so down in real life brought other people so much joy.
yeah. Though it is also always worth mentioning, there is a common misconception about his death,
Mm-hmm.
about how it was like it was depression. He was, depressed and he hung himself when it was the whole Lewy body dementia thing.
Yeah.
Like it's always like I always want to make sure that people kind of look into that. Not that, it's great that people address depression in that way, even if it's when he's brought up, but it's like just for the, full fact of the matter.
Well, even then, I mean, you could take the same point. It's sad that somebody that brought people so much joy went through that in their personal life.
Yeah, because
And,
there
and
was also
had to get up and deal with that every day. It's like, well, I mean, it's not like, but I mean, I kind of equate it now to Michael J. Fox and his Parkinson's. It's really sad to watch Michael J. Fox decline.
because wasn't that another thing, was it shortly before his death was announced, it had just come out that he was diagnosed with Parkinson's. Robin
Yeah,
Williams. So it was like a whole bunch of things kind of came together, and everybody didn't quite know what conclusion to draw or whatever.
yeah,
But to my understanding, the whole Lewy body dementia thing was that while he was doing it, like there's a good chance he wasn't aware he was doing it.
yeah.
So,
And from seeing Robin Williams' stand up, I find it almost really comforting that I know, or I have a feeling that somewhere in the afterlife he's doing a bit about that. He's doing a bit on himself not being aware of what he was doing.
and there was something else I was going to mention was the whole idea of how sometimes he was accused of like stealing jokes from other comedians.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing was that it was hard for them to get mad at her because it was his style, the riffing thing,
Mm-hmm.
where like because he thought so quickly, he would just pull from things and he wouldn't maybe realize till after the fact, oh shit, that's somebody else's joke.
Mm-hmm.
He would like write checks to the people whose jokes that he told.
He just all around seemed like a good dude, and he was always a fun presence on the screen, even if the movie he was in wasn't fun. Like, you knew that he was going to try to have the best time with it he could.
There's also some of his stuff from like that 80s era that I'd like to check out again that got a lot of acclaim, like Moscow on the Hudson.
Mm-hmm.
It's a movie I remember like nothing about, but is typically beloved, I think. So I'd like to check that out again soon.
Yeah.
But yeah, he did have a lot. We can't, overlook the fact that he did have a lot of shit, but we can say that about a lot of the actors we're going to be talking about or we have talked about. So that's nothing.
I've got a couple on my list left that I'm sure will still come up. So with your number 7, with talking about Robin Williams and Montgomery Clift, is it going to get happier at number 7?
It's somebody that's alive. And
Good start.
Not only is it somebody alive, it's somebody that's got some exciting shit coming up.
Okay.
My number 7 is Denzel.
Ah.
So I don't know what I can say about Denzel that hasn't already been said. I can't. He's one of those cases where it's hard to believe how old that he is because he's so badass still.
Mm-hmm.
Like, have you seen either of the Equalizer movies yet?
No.
I know it's weird. I'm getting ready to talk about why Denzel's one of the greatest actors ever, and the Equalizer's like the first one I drop. I know that sounds weird, but just to give you the idea of, it's interesting how he's at the age that he is now and is doing this kind of stuff still is very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But for a while there, Denzel was one of your favorites, if not your favorite, for a brief period.
Spoiler, I'm not gonna say much on Denzel right now because I'll have more to say later.
I was thinking it was around the time The Manchurian Candidate came out. He was like your favorite or close to it.
Mm-hmm.
But I might, especially for time's sake, I might cut this down a little bit and I'll just continue. Should he come up later? But it's when you talk about like sort of how he played a lot of, I mean, obviously he had stuff like Cry Freedom and Glory in the late 80s, kind of when he was getting started. But to think that he came from kind of this sort of loose place, like stuff like The Mighty Quinn was like really sort of light, if actiony. But when he got his start, his very first movie with Carbon Copy. Do you? And what's really interesting is he was actually talking about it recently, and there's stuff that he learned from George Siegel
Hmm.
that he still like uses today.
It's always interesting to kind of look at an actor's tree of who they've worked with and see what they pulled from where.
Yeah, and he had stuff even before stuff like Cry Freedom. He had like a soldier story.
Hmm.
And he was kind of going back and forth between showing how he could do like the light stuff and the action thing, but also like do intensity like we had hardly ever seen before. And winning an Oscar so early in his career, and how much he has not disappointed after that. And he's another one of those ones where it's kind of always exciting, even that area where he was doing stuff like Out of Time. It was kind of always exciting when he had a movie coming out. You know, he had his Tony Scott era, where he got really into the action stuff. But there would still always be this drama that popped in and out. Sometimes real life characters like Malcolm X or Reuben Carter or stuff like that. And obviously, I will sit here all day and talk to you about Fences if you wanted.
I figure you could make a day of talking about Fences and his Spike Lee movies.
Yeah, I just rewatched He Got Game again recently, and that is just, it's so hard to pinpoint what my favorite performance is. Dad recently asked me what my favorite Denzel performance was, and I said like 4 different things at once. It's like just pick Fences or He Got Game or Training Day. It's probably one of those. And every now and then a Fallen will come in.
Yeah. And then even then he sometimes has times where, he had Spike Lee to help him with this, but movies like Inside Man.
Yeah. How they kind of stick out in Spike Lee's filmography, yet still the pairing of him and Spike Lee is just like unmatched.
Mm-hmm.
No Better Blues is a pretty good kind of overlooked one in Spike Lee's filmography and his filmography. But there's the action stuff in between, like The Siege and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, was The Siege really all that actiony? I don't really remember. But Courage Under Fire was a great one.
Crimson Tide, which you
Yeah.
didn't like, but that was actiony for him.
Yeah, but I'd still think mainly it probably comes down to Training Day and Fences.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing about Training Day that I couldn't really appreciate for a while, because I hadn't been as into his filmography when I first saw Training Day, just how out of nowhere him in a part like that came from.
Mm-hmm.
It was wild that he played a part like that.
Especially when you look back on the filmography and it's sandwiched in between Herman Boone and John Q.
Oh my god, yeah. And The Hurricane had come right before that.
Yeah.
And it's like the fact that he played just this really, by the end of the movie, he's just a straight up action movie villain.
Mm-hmm.
But the performance is still there.
It's like it's an action movie villain that's almost teetering on comic book movie villain.
Yeah, like the King Kong speech.
Yeah.
Like here's the thing. Okay, so you typically separate over the top and almost actiony like or whatever is over here, and then like Oscar stuff is all the way over here.
Mm-hmm.
And when you watch him give the King Kong speech, you get the same response in regards to, you have the action side or the over the top side saying like, man, this is like so over the top villainy. And it's like this would be at home in, like you said, some comic book movie or something. And on the other side, you have people saying that is absolutely the scene that got him the Oscar.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like the fact that it gets both those reactions like that is.
It's also one of those cases where it's one of the few times that he has. It's, how do I put it? It's not an over the top death, but it's kind of carried out in an over the top way. And after it's done, you look at it and say, "Yep, that character deserved that."
And while we're on that topic, I just got to say this, because I actually think about this sometimes. I'm not gonna lie. It might seem superfluous, but I think about this sometimes. Do you mind giving me another actor that would have played Alonzo Harris and won an Oscar for it. Because David Ayer wrote Training Day.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Antoine Fuqua, we'd have to give a lot of credit, but specifically what I'm thinking is David Ayer wrote Training Day.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like, and we've got Ethan Hawke in here doing his thing, but with Alonzo being the kind of character that he is, Denzel played Alonzo and won an Oscar for it and made Training Day an Oscar-winning movie.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like if anybody else had played Alonzo, Training Day would just be a David Ayer movie.
Yeah, because I could think of several actors that could play Alonzo Harris, but they're not going to get any award recognition for it.
And they could do it well,
Mm-hmm.
but not Denzel well.
Yeah.
So, like, to the point that well is a total understatement. But
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, and I could go further into fences, but for time's sake, since we're only on 7.
Mm-hmm.
7, I believe, a movie he turned down, by the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we might have to speed. It's crazy. We might have to speed up some of these, and these are the top. These are the cream of the crop.
Yeah, this is often a problem with the list video.
Yeah.
But yeah, obviously I went on and on about I did a review of Fences, and then when we talked about that awards season, I feel like people should know by now how I feel about Fences.
Mm-hmm.
I don't get all bent out of shape when people say like, oh, this should have won, or oh, why didn't this win, or whatever. I think people who supposedly don't care about Oscars seem to care about that a little too much. I'm still pissed off at Casey Affleck. It's been 4 years. I still get angry when I see Casey Affleck's face.
I remember Fences was filmed in Pittsburgh, and we went through the neighborhood and explored where Fences was filmed. And I think if my memory serves me correctly, when we were driving through that neighborhood, at one point you just said, "God damn Casey Affleck."
Goddamn Casey Affleck. Hey, there's the office that Denzel went to.
So do you want me to go with my number 7?
Yeah.
Okay.
We're gonna come back to possibly.
Yeah. We've been talking about a lot of leads for a while. You want to talk about somebody that's not really a lead, but still is fun?
Yes.
My number 7 is Willem Dafoe.
Nice.
Yeah. And what really sold it to me is Lenny, get down. Get out of there. Lenny, get off there. I'm trying to talk about Willem Dafoe. What really sold it for me is I was thinking earlier today, and I was like, my introduction to Willem Dafoe was Spider-Man, the very first Spider-Man. Now, when you look at the way Willem Dafoe talks and the way Willem Dafoe looks, could you assume that he's an actor that could easily get typecast as the villain in everything he's in?
Obviously.
How often is he the villain in what he's in?
The great thing about answering that question is that he's in so much shit that goes beyond the good guy, bad guy thing.
Mm-hmm.
That we're in such a gray area.
Mm-hmm.
So many of his movies are a gray area.
They are. The dude
Sometimes
lives in the gray area. But I mean, you look at everything that he's done, and he's an actor that's got an extensive list. This guy does a lot of movies, and you know what? Fucking good, because he's great.
He's one of those people where you almost forget how long he's been around.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you look, and he's got quite the list. I mean, we've got the first Spider-Man. We never talked about that. We've got Platoon, Shadow of the Vampire, the insanity that is The Lighthouse. I mean, even in movies like American Dreams, he's total anti-Willem Dafoe. And a movie that I know everyone has seen, and I know a lot of people talk about this movie, but I don't think we're ever allowed to overlook Willem in the Boondock Saints.
Yeah.
He's fantastic in the Boondock Saints.
The movie would not be what it is without him, that's for sure.
No. Anybody other than Willem Dafoe, and you just have another Tarantino wannabe movie. But
Which some people,
Willem Dafoe legitimizes it. For me, Willem Dafoe in Boondock Saints was Harvey Keitel for Reservoir Dogs. He
yeah,
was the actor that was brought in, and we say, okay, this means we take this shit seriously. And
I
it's
could see
so
that.
crazy how well Willem Dafoe, who's so good at going over the top in things like Shadow the Vampire and the original Spider-Man, how he can do Lighthouse, we could throw that in there too. How he can do so many subtle roles. Inside Man, he's essentially an extra. He doesn't get a lot of Willem Dafoe stuff to do. He's very normal and very dialed down.
His most memorable line is $5.
Yeah. Look at American Psycho. You've got
Yeah.
Christian Bale hamming it up to the extreme. And he's just a dude trying to figure out what the fuck is going on, and only seems about half interested in it most of the time, which is what he's using to try to uncover what's going on.
You did hear how they shot his scenes, right?
No.
Where they had he did one take as he knows that Patrick is insane,
Mm-hmm.
then one where he doesn't know Patrick's insane, and then one where he's unsure, and then all three of those takes are kind of jumbled together, and that's what we see in the movie.
It's really interesting. And then you look at a movie like Aquaman, where he could even play like a mentor type person now, and you would think he's only going to be a mentor to a psychopath.
I was gonna say when he was cast in Aquaman, everybody thought the same thing. Oh, what villain is he playing?
Yeah. And that's the thing with Willem Dafoe. You think he's gonna be the villain, and he's not most of the time, even though he looks and speaks like a villain.
With that said,
Willem Dafoe was in the running with Walken and Gary Oldman for my plays all kinds of different shit category, and Willem Dafoe won out because Gary Oldman's a chameleon. Gary Oldman can use makeup to help him, which is nothing against Gary Oldman. Gary Oldman's fantastic.
Mhm.
Christopher Walken, there's always a layer of Walken in there. Willem Dafoe is one of the ones that can change who he is without changing.
There isn't a Willem Dafoe layer.
No.
It's all character all the time.
Yeah. Like Willem Dafoe is one of those people you'd have no idea how he is in real life. You'd never know.
I binged watched so many interviews with him when The Lighthouse was out. He is so pleasant. That's a great when the Florida Project was out as well. He did one of those SAG interviews that I love those videos a lot. They're about an hour to an hour and a half, and it's just an actor being interviewed in front of like aspiring actors.
Mm-hmm.
And
Kind
I
of like
love
an inside the actor studio thing.
Yeah, exactly like that actually.
Mm.
And he talked about one thing, and that's what I was going to bring up when I said, with that said, about him not always playing crazy people. Have we mentioned Wild at Heart yet?
No.
Talking about the crazy that he can muster. If I remember the story correctly, or at least the vague details of it, obviously Wild at Heart, Bobby Peru is probably one of the craziest characters he has ever played. And this, we're including his Lars von Trier movies. And that character, obviously that character had that weird suit. And he was like, all right, so this is a really kind of fucked up character. And so I'm going to have a lot to talk about with David Lynch. So let's see how that goes. And the talk was, okay, Willem, here's your costume. And that was it was like he had the costume and he had the teeth, and then everything else was whatever he did. In that,
yeah, I think Willem Dafoe is really great. I think Willem Dafoe is criminally underrated. Even with all the Oscar nominations he's gotten recently, someone give him the damn trophy.
I heard he was really proud of it, and I loved hearing it. How a pretty big deal it was for an actor like him when he got nominated for At Eternity's Gate.
Mm-hmm.
Not only was it somewhat unexpected, I wasn't predicting him. That it was for leading.
Mm-hmm.
It was for leading for a movie that was really out there and kind of off the radar at the time.
Mm-hmm.
It's like for an actor like him to be recognized as a leading actor was like a huge deal to him.
It's like the fact that Gary Oldman's first Oscar nomination was for leading.
Yeah.
It's
And
always
then when he
nice
actually
to see actors like that get to take the front stage. And Willem is by far no exception. Now Willem's done it. Now Gary Oldman's done it. And I know he wasn't on my list, but God damn it, it's John Goodman's turn. Just build a project around John Goodman. I will forever say, I didn't see a lot of the movies that came out that year, but I will forever say that John Goodman got robbed for not getting nominated for 10 Cloverfield Lane.
I can get behind that. He got a couple of critic group wins.
Mm-hmm.
But he's the kind of guy that needs Alexander Payne.
That would help.
I feel like they could do something really special.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, that's my Willem discussion. Thank you for coming to my Willem talk.
All right, so we're going on to number 6.
Yeah, bet you didn't get to think. I bet you didn't think you get to talk about Willem Dafoe tonight.
I remember you said you wanted to talk about him when we talked about the horror movies.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, now's your chance. All right, my number 6.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I've talked about this kind of extensively in some cases, so this may not take too long. My number 6 is Richard Dreyfuss, which might seem random to some people because he's been in mostly shit for a pretty long time now. Like, was his last very notable part when he played Dick Cheney?
Probably.
But
then, of course, Christian Bale came along and said, "Watch this." Christian Bale's a delight in Vice.
When Vice was coming out, I remember, even though Bale is the chameleon that he is, my first thought was, I just can't imagine anybody else but Richard Dreyfuss now, though.
And now, what do you say?
Well, let's stick to Dreyfuss, because yeah, Dreyfuss has obviously been stuck in a lot of shit for quite some time now. But when you look at like the first decade or two of his career, it was like non-stop success.
The dude was in the first blockbuster.
Yeah, and before that, American Graffiti.
Mm-hmm.
And then won his Oscar for The Goodbye Girl. One for a very much comedic performance.
Mm-hmm.
Yet also a pretty decent portrayal of alcoholism.
Let's not forget Close Encounters.
Close Encounters, which he has one of the best portrayals of obsession probably on screen.
Mm-hmm.
And to have that kind of thing present in that kind of movie is really unique. There's Jaws. And what's interesting about that is that a few years ago, actually probably like 5 years ago or something, I got to see Jaws in a theater, which was very exciting. And I noticed something that kind of blew my mind. I was already a massive Dreyfuss fan at this point. I was already a massive Hooper fan at this point.
Mm-hmm.
But and of course, you look at Jaws. You have Roy Scheider, who was incredible. Roy Scheider almost made my list for All That Jazz alone. But the performance a lot of people take away from Jaws is Robert Shaw. And I absolutely get it. I was on board with that for a very long time. But after I saw Jaws in a theater, I kept watching Hooper. I was even watching Hooper during Shaw's big speech. Because we kind of come in on Quint as he's telling the story, and always in the background off to the right, Hooper's just watching him tell the story.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time it reached that point, it occurred to me, I think Dreyfuss gives my favorite performance in Jaws. I think Hooper is my favorite character and performance in that movie. And it doesn't even stop there. There is, well, you talk about like in the 70s and the 80s, he had all that stuff. Don't forget, I believe it was 95 we got in Mr. Holland's Opus, where we talked about Robin Williams and Dead Poets Society briefly. And it's like that sort of, that role, like Edward James Olmos in Stand and Deliver comes to mind as well. Like the quintessential teacher role.
Which it's on the Mount Rushmore teacher roles.
Yeah, because it's really easy to do that, like cliche and cheesy. But I don't know that I remember an insincere note in Mr. Holland's Opus. And a lot of that comes from his performance in it. Because that is like one of the, and like the movie as far as being that type also, but his role and his performance also are just like the peak of that little subgenre of the teacher movie, I guess you could call it.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the strength and the power of the finale of a movie like Stand By Me comes from his narration. And his narration plays a big part in the nostalgic feel of it because of his his voice and the way he tells the story. Then there's stuff like the Apprenticeship of Dudley Kravitz, which is something like really early in his career that was kind of the okay, he's definitely somebody to watch kind of scenario. But then you also had stuff that movies like Whose Life Is It Anyway, where he was so bad into his vices that he has no memory of making that movie, and he's the lead in it. And it's like he still somehow finds a way to be memorable. There is one movie that I love that he's the star of, and he gets to play a dual role, even if he was a bit overshadowed. It's a great movie called Moon Over Parador, about a dictator that dies, and he looks like the guy, so they try to replace him with the dead dictator. And it's great. The only problem with this is he is overshadowed by Raul Julia. And they're both, and it's great to see them play off each other, but I cannot recommend that movie more. There's a movie called The Big Fix that's kind of like a noir comedy kind of thing that's really great. John Lithgow is in that one as well. So he has all these little small things like here and there that really stand out. But even when he's in like, a big barrage of crap, there's some sort of dignity that he brings to it. He was my least favorite movie of last year was a movie called Polar. He's in it for like 30 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
You better be sure it's the best 30 seconds of the movie. I was so happy and then pissed off when I saw Red, and it turned out that he was the villain in Red. Because I don't think I knew he was in Red when I went into it. I was like, oh my God, he's the villain in it. This is the greatest thing ever. And he's like barely in it. And I hate that movie. So put two and two together. Maybe this goes without saying, but I think there's only one thing that stands out that I haven't mentioned yet. Once again, though, he's got that balance of he can do the great dramatic work, but he's so invaluable as a comedic actor, and the way that he can kind of make that bleed into the dramatic roles or whatever. There's so much comedy in Hooper. And stuff like Down and Out in Beverly Hills, of course, like stuff that's pure comedy. But I have said before, and now I'll say really quickly again, he gives my favorite performance in any comedy ever. He gives what I believe to be the funniest performance of all time to me. My opinion, of course. And you might think the fact that he won an Oscar for being in a comedy and playing a very comedic character, that would be the one, but it isn't. Now, I am, of course, talking about the time he did a comedy and outshined Bill Murray. And Bill Murray obviously is brilliant in What About Bob, but Richard Dreyfuss in What About Bob has got to be my favorite comedic performance ever. And the fact that he really is a master of comedy, but he's done so much drama also. I don't know that people remember him that way entirely. Or they think of Hooper, who is like a comedic character in what's essentially a horror movie. But no, he is like a gold standard comedy actor, and it cannot be said enough. He's another one also though where you hear the horror stories about he had a hard time getting along with people, and people had a hard time getting along with him, which may be why. And obviously he really got into the drugs and alcohol thing. But like a joke I've been making was he's looked 90 for like 30 years.
Him and Bill Murray clashed a lot making What About Bob too, didn't they?
Yeah, one of them I think Dreyfuss got an ashtray thrown at him or something.
Oh God.
But but yeah, anytime he's in a movie, that even with all the crap he's been in, like The Crew, which is bad enough to single out. I'm just so ready. I'm so ready when I see him on a cast list. So that's something I take into account a lot. That's how I feel about Cagney and stuff like them, where it's like if I see him on the cast list, it's like let's fucking go. Like let's do this. Get the person on screen now. So I think that's where I stand with Lithgow, for Christ's sake, Dreyfus.
Okay, my number 6. You had to eliminate him from your list, but you get to talk about him now. My number 6. Let's talk about Jeff Bridges for a minute.
Let's. Well, first and foremost, let's hope to God that he is getting better right now.
Yeah, no kidding.
That's scary shit. I do not want. If there's one person we cannot lose right now, it would be Jeff Bridges.
And the sad thing is if there's one year that would take him away from us, it's 2020.
We got about 3 days left. He can do it. I believe in it.
Hang in there, Jeff. Hang in there.
I love that he even stuck to the dude when he made the announcement. He started his announcement with "New shit has come to light."
Yeah. And that's what I love. Like, I feel like there's a lot of characters that shy away from roles or have roles they don't want to talk about. And I feel like Jeff Bridges is one of those actors. He'll talk about anything that he did.
Yeah.
He has no shame. He'll talk about everything. And to me, that's somebody that loves what they do. And I feel like Jeff Bridges is one of those people that clearly shows he loves what he does. And he's getting good at it too.
I can't remember a time I saw Jeff Bridges in like this sort of post Crazy Heart era where he didn't just seem full of joy like all the time.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's probably because he constantly works, and
Yeah.
he knows this is like his calling.
It's crazy that it took him so long to finally nab the trophy.
Yeah, and it wasn't one of those cases where he like had like a dip. He was like consistently nominated, like through his whole career.
Yeah, and he's another actor that you see something like The Dude, and you think, oh, that's probably a lot of his characters like that. No, The Dude is an abnormality, which is really funny because he's so like The Dude in real life. But as far as characters go, it's abnormal. I mean, look at the difference alone when he did that, and then turn around the next time he works with the Coen brothers, we get Rooster Cogburn. And his Rooster Cogburn is wonderful. I know John Wayne got the Oscar and everything, but goddamn, do I love Jeff Bridges' Rooster Cogburn.
Yeah, because it's such his own thing.
It is. And I love him for it. I love him for it so much.
Because you really get the whole feel. It wasn't just, this is a guy playing an alcoholic. You truly believe he's constantly intoxicated.
Just like you believe the dude is really constantly high.
Yeah. And it's like, it's like he's just that good, quite honestly.
Yeah.
I mean, you can believe what you want, but that's what it is.
I think one of my favorite things about Jeff Bridges too is just he has such a warm voice that he speaks with. Like just a very jovial voice that it's almost like in Iron Man when he yells at Peter Billingsley. It's almost shocking. It's like you're a kid and the parent that's always been nice to you finally yells at you. It like throws you in shock.
And what's interesting now is the like post Crazy Heart era Bridges and like 80s and 90s Bridges. They're like, I don't know what it is exactly, but it feels like two different people, if not more than that. It's like there's a new era of Bridges that started the last decade. Because he really didn't have that jovial vibe that he does now. And I don't know that I've seen enough old interviews with him to know for sure if this came with age or if he's always been like that.
Because the dude seems chill as hell.
Yeah.
Like you've pointed me in the direction of some YouTube videos. I love to watch Jeff Bridges tell a story.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite things.
Whenever he does the roundtables for like Oscar season, you can always know, like, people just kind of talk back and forth and they exchange, shop talk or whatever. When Bridges starts talking, everybody just listens.
Yeah.
And then there was the thing that Bill Hader told that story and did the eerily great impression of him when he was talking about the anxiety that he has.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like he gets really bad stage fright and he gets really nervous when he has to perform. And Bridges' response was, "That's your buddy, man. You just got to throw your arm around it, man." And then there's that moment, that great moment of respect when Marshall Ali won for Moonlight and he beat Bridges for Hell or High Water.
Mm-hmm.
And he was walking up to the stage and he passed by Bridges and it occurred to him and he turned around and shook Bridges' hand and then went to the stage. Like there's so much respect surrounding him.
Yeah. And it's because he's the fucking man. And he's very for somebody that has such a warm voice, he's so versatile.
Yeah.
Like you would think, like if somebody told you that Jeff Bridges was always typecast as the nice guy, I'd believe it. But he's
And
not.
you see something like the remake of The Vanishing.
Mm-hmm.
Where he's like the craziest the characters go.
Yeah. But he's another one that if he's got a project coming out, especially these days, more often than not, it's probably going to be good.
We haven't mentioned Starman yet.
Mm-hmm.
That's another great meshing of like comedy, but there's something else to it. There's like I almost said otherworldly, but that's a little too literal. But that's the thing is, yeah. After he did Rooster, there was that era like Rooster and R.I.P.D. And it was like, oh, now he's kind of doing the same thing. But it's like, I feel like that had to have been the first time he got that complaint in his whole career. Because you go back and look at everything else, and it feels like hardly anything repeats.
Yeah.
He played Dwayne again in a sequel to The Last Picture Show, but obviously sequels don't count. But and same thing for Tron, I guess. But in Tron, he's playing two roles also, even if it's a little whatever you want to call that CGI.
Mm.
Yeah, and all the vast array of stuff too, like something like Tron.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's just as proud of as something like Crazy Heart or Lebowski or The Fisher King or something.
Mm-hmm.
Fearless. Oh my God, the last 10 minutes or so of Fearless is like if you're ever depressed, watch Fearless. Is all I would say. Like if you wanna really feel like alive and like happy with life, like just the fact that you're breathing, watch Fearless. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. If you want to go more modern or more newer stuff too, Bad Times at the El Royale. He's great.
Yeah.
So great.
So it's always fun when he plays mysterious characters like that, where you're never quite sure where he's coming from.
And it's great too because Bad Times at the El Royale it's such a Jeff Bridges way to do it because he's such a warm, inviting character until all of a sudden he's not.
Yeah.
He does that very well. Obadiah Stane was the same way.
If I remember correctly, didn't his character in Bad Times at El Royale have memory problems? Like he was like in the early stages of dementia.
Yeah.
So it's like he didn't even know that he was kind of a bad guy.
Mm-hmm. The dude's just so good, and he could do anything. He could do comedy. He could do western. He could do space. I mean, the dude has range for days.
Yeah, I kind of speaking of westerns, I kind of like his movie Bad Company from 1972. I think
Mm-hmm.
Fat City is a really good one.
Is he one of the only actors that their like their parent was an actor and they actually outshone them?
I'm sure there's some like Downey would probably be up there.
Oh yeah.
I feel like there's other examples, but he's definitely a prime one. What's interesting though is how much he and his dad were known for separate things because Lloyd seemed to really take off with the comedy.
Oh man, Lloyd Bridges in Airplane is my jam.
Lloyd Bridges in Airplane, Lloyd Bridges on Seinfeld.
I haven't got that far yet. I just started season 3 tonight.
You haven't run into Izzy Mandelbaum yet.
Nah, nah. But no, Lloyd Bridges in Airplane is my jam. I know Robert Hayes is funny. I know Leslie Nielsen's funny. Robert Stack's funny. Give me Lloyd Bridges in Airplane all day.
Peter Graves.
Yeah. give me Lloyd Bridges all day in Airplane, and I'll be pissing my pants.
And the Hot Shots movies.
Mm-hmm. Even a movie like Mafia that's not that great, he's still fun in it. But yeah, I think that's good on Jeff Bridges.
So his filmography is so expansive. Thunderbolt and Lightfoot.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, you could go on all day. Rancho Deluxe. There's so much stuff. Against All Odds. Jagged Edge. I could sit here and name his movies all day. Jagged Edge.
White Squall.
What is it? White Squall's really good. All right. Are we ready for? We're on number 5 now.
Top 5.
All right. I'm very enthusiastic about my number 5.
Okay.
Unfortunately, he's no longer with us. The first movie I saw him in, I would have never guessed how great he was. But after an extensive look at his filmography over the last 15 years or so, this guy is what I thought he might have been higher when I started this. Like 5 feels low.
Mm-hmm.
Fucking George C. Scott
Hmm.
is. I'm trying to figure out where to even start. I suppose the easiest place to start would be Patton, where it's obviously the kind of role that it would be, where you think it'd be super duper showy, and he's obviously got one of the most insanely memorable, popular monologues of all time, where the opening scene is just him in front of the big ass American flag, and he's doing the whole thing about how, make some other son of a bitch die for his country, not you dying for your country, all that stuff. I'm butchering it, but I'm just so excited to talk about it. But the thing about that was, obviously he was very stoic and very terrifying in many roles, but specifically Patton. But there's also moments where he is comforting the dying soldiers, and he's really conflicted, and he's just these monstrous monologues here. Like, that's the most famous one, is the opening scene. But if you wanted to give any actor ever a monologue, especially if it was anger released, you would give it to him. And what's great about this is that you want to talk about angry monologues. Here's this. Obviously, he won the Oscar for Patton. Kind of. He didn't want it, and I don't think he accepted it, but he won. And the thing about it was, I think it seems more bitter when you hear the different stories about, like, oh, fuck that shit or whatever. But to my understanding, it was just that he didn't like the idea of actors competing with each other, because they're kind of all on the same ground. But he didn't want the Oscar, so he didn't accept it. And it's like, you would think that would make the Academy a little bitter and say, like, oh, well, fuck this guy. If he doesn't want it, then we'll stop nominating him. He is so good in a movie called The Hospital that Patty Chayefsky wrote. They nominated him again the very next year. And it might be hard to say this, he might be just as good in The Hospital. The Hospital is this really crazy, like, satire on the medical system. You know Patty Chayefsky. He also wrote Network, among other things. And he's a doctor in a hospital who's just getting way overloaded with everything, and he's basically, I would say he's about to go out of his mind. He's basically already out of his mind with all the shit he has to deal with. And then a serial killer just starts offing people in the hospital. And just upping the things that are wrong with this character's, like, day, basically.
It kind of sounds like falling down through the eyes of a doctor.
Yeah, in more or less one location most of the time. And it gets to the point to where he has a full George C. Scott monologue about him being impotent.
Mm-hmm.
And makes it the most epic speech you've ever heard. And it's if you want like prime George C. Scott anger, this is the movie that you probably want apart from Patton. But the thing about that is though is that normally when that's an actor's thing, they can be kind of dismissed. Like Pacino kind of gets this a lot too, where it's like, oh, all they do is shout and scream. But in George C. Scott's case, every time he was shouting or screaming or yelling, you got the sense that that's because he meant every single word that he was saying. Like every single word he said was coming from his core. And that was so many of his performances. Obviously, one we absolutely must talk about is Dr. Strangelove, which, to my understanding, was a performance that he loved in retrospect, not so much at the time. Because apparently what he wanted was, because we know the kind of movie Dr. Strangelove is. Like talking about satire, obviously, where we had satire in the hospital. Dr. Strangelove is almost just parody. So obviously his performance is very over the top, like extremely over the top. And the more over the top it is, the better it is, and the funnier it is. And that's the thing too, was it's like the more he gets like that in Patton, the kind of more intimidating he becomes. But in stuff like The Hospital or Doctor Strangelove, the angrier and louder he gets, the funnier he gets because of the context. And to my understanding, I'm not positive on this, but what I think I heard was that Kubrick said, just do a practice round, like just to open up, do it as over the top and goofy as possible, and then we'll shoot the more grounded version that you want to do. I'm assuming you know where this is going. Those over the top, more goofy takes were the ones that were shot. Without his knowledge. That's what I heard. I don't know if that's entirely true, but I kind of believe it. So like there's even the point where he like falls at one point, like in mid monologue. That wasn't supposed to happen. But Kubrick's like, that's just perfect. Like that's another detail this performance needs. But then we have stuff where he and Jack Lemmon kind of work together to do unthinkable remakes that were really successful. They did a TV remake of 12 Angry Men, where Lemmon was doing Fonda's part and Scott was doing Lee J. Cobb's part, which just seems perfect. It's like, yes, of course that movie exists. You know, even though you can't top the original 12 Angry Men, nobody's mad this version exists. And then Lemmon and Scott did Inherent the Wind, with Lemmon doing Spencer Tracy and Scott doing Frederick March. And it's like, yes, of course, you would think the original Inherent the Wind shouldn't try to top it or anything. It's like they didn't really try to top it. It's just like, no, we kind of needed a Jack Lemmon George C. Scott version of those movies. And then one of my personal favorite performances of his that I'm actually going to show off because I'm not sure how hard it is to find anymore. I just happened to find it at random. And it kind of became a meme at a time for a time. It's Hardcore, where his daughter kind of goes into like the underground porn thing, and he has to go in and find her. And it's like this really emotionally devastating performance, which obviously was used as a meme, where they had like when he's watching the porn with his daughter in it, they had him watching the Jack and Jill trailer and stuff like that. But that the performance is so powerful that even that did not taint it. And he's in Anatomy of a Murder, which is him and Jimmy Stewart on opposite sides of this trial. How amazing does that sound? And they're just a small fraction of that cast. But the great thing about that is you think Jimmy Stewart and George C. Scott during a trial, you would think like really over the top and the really acting and kind of that thing. But it's, to my understanding, considered one of the more realistic portrayals of a trial. Like it's really grounded in realism, and their performances are much more like natural, which is really great, kind of showing what else he's capable of. And then there's some of the really bad dudes he's played, like in The Hustler. He is a very memorable Ebenezer Scrooge in one of the adaptations of A Christmas Carol. And another one that often goes overlooked, which I've talked about extensively in another video, that seems like it wouldn't fit him, but he's great in it, and the movie's great, and that's The Exorcist 3.
Mm-hmm.
He's really great in, and gives like a real dignity to that movie. That it was kind of able to carry on its own, but having him at the center of it and playing it so straight was really that's definitely a movie I recommend often. So yeah, I think that's the and I didn't even mention it by name. Obviously, the first movie I ever saw him in was Angus,
Mm-hmm.
and that's just kind of how I knew him for a long time. And then as I gradually started seeing these more and more, Patton might have been the next one I saw, that or Doctor Strangelove, and then it was like I just and he's also kind of been in crap occasionally, but it's how can you just not be drawn to something if he's in the cast list? And it's yeah. So I could continue, but we're probably in about the 2.5 hour area on time. So I'll just leave this at this, I think.
All I can think about now is him and Jack Lemmon doing like a version of like a Will Ferrell, John C. Reilly comedy.
Oh, wouldn't that have been great?
Like they do Talladega Nights and George C. Scott as Count On.
And they would have been like what we were talking about before with Steve Martin and John Candy, was they're both so good at drama and they're both so good at comedy, they could have switched back and forth between the straight man and the comedic part.
Yeah. All right. So my number 5 is somebody that I've talked with you about a lot. Somebody I've always really enjoyed. My number 5 is Paul Giamatti.
Nice.
Yeah. There's not a lot that I've seen Paul Giamatti do that I didn't enjoy. And before anybody puts in the comments, yes, I know I need to check out Billions because I know he's a gold mine there. But my introduction to Paul Giamatti was Big Fat Liar, and I'm so glad that he came out like he did out of that movie.
Did we saw Man on the Moon first, I think. Or did I?
Yeah, maybe. You might be right about that.
And he was
Private Parts too.
Yeah, we saw the Truman Show when it came out, but we wouldn't have known to know who he was.
No, same with The Negotiator.
Yeah.
But he's one of those that like he has a lot of small roles in the beginning of his career, and it's just been fun to watch him flourish and become a heavy hitter.
I shit you not. There is a movie with Meryl Streep and Liam Neeson called Before and After,
Mm-hmm.
where he's an extra.
Mm-hmm.
Like they walk into a room of people, and the people sitting there kind of turn around and look, and he's so clear. Like he's so easy to spot.
That's funny. But like, I'm glad. Well, I'm glad that he stuck persistently with it and kept going because he's great. He's great in The Illusionist. He's great in Cinderella Man. He's great in Private Parts, Man on the Moon, like we talked about, Big Fat Liar. He's great. But his magnum opus is Sideways.
Yeah.
That's his magnum opus. He is so great in Sideways. It's just this cynical, woe is me, the world sucks person.
You know what's great about that also is, and we've kind of talked about this with others, is that you could say his magnum opus is Sideways.
Mm-hmm.
Others might say his magnum opus is John Adams.
Yeah.
And the great thing about that is how different are those two things that could be considered his greatest.
And it's like you said with I can't remember what actor you said it about. It was Richard Dreyfuss. Paul Giamatti brings like a sense of dignity when he does something.
Yeah.
And one of my biggest regrets is when I found out that Fred Claus was PG.
Yeah.
But even then, Giamatti's a great Santa. You would never think it looking at him.
It is weird that he's the little brother to Vince Vaughn. I could never figure that one out.
No, but Paul Giamatti's just so he's just like there's nothing striking about the way he looks. Like he's a great representation of the ordinary man.
I was wondering what that pause was. That pause was tact, wasn't
Yes.
it?
Yeah, I didn't want to come out and say Paul Giamatti's an ugly motherfucker, because he's not. But like, he's great as a representation of the everyday person, like what the average person might look like. And it's especially apparent when you have him in movies like Sideways, where he's right alongside Thomas Hayden Church.
Yeah.
Like, he's such a good representation of the dorky, depressed friend that you're just trying to have a good time, and he just won't stop pissing all over it and doing what he wants to do, even though the weekend is for Jack.
Yeah.
Like, when you watch, like, the first time I watched Sideways, I was like, man, Jack's really kind of a dick because the way that he was being with Sandra Oh and everything. And then you look back on it, you're like, no, Miles is the dick, because Miles planned this whole trip around shit he wanted to do.
Yeah.
They ended up losing a day staying at his mom's because that's what he wanted to do.
We always laugh at the stuff where, like, when they first meet Sandra and they're trying the wine and Jack's just absently saying, "Tastes pretty good to me."
Mm-hmm.
It's like, that's because he is just so disinterested.
Yeah.
He's so interested in Sandra Oh, but he's so disinterested in everything else.
Yeah. Because he knows he's on a trip that wasn't designed for his likes. Like the thumbs up in the restaurant.
Yeah.
But
And
I mean, Paul Giamatti's another one of those actors that there's a lot of poo on that resume. But the stuff that's good is just too good to ignore. And he's too good in it to ignore.
yeah, did you see Barney's version yet?
No, but I hear great things.
That, and there's we talked about Shoot 'Em Up not that long. We talked about Shoot 'Em Up sometime this year.
Mm-hmm.
That was certainly a divergence.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. But he made it work. I mean, Paul Giamatti became threatening.
He's genuinely threatening, but it's also that case where it's like, when you see what they were going for, and he's basically just being a live action movie version of Elmer Fudd.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, yeah, Paul Giamatti, that's right.
Yeah. I also like to look at Shoot 'Em Up and go, oh, so that's what Marty Wolf did after he got kicked out of Hollywood.
Then in some of these later parts he's had, there's a lot of range, to the point that when were you well, I think it was the 2015 Oscars when Chris Rock hosted. It
Mm-hmm.
was 2015 movies. And he was on stage talking about how that was when one of the controversies was happening, where all the nominees were white and Chris Rock was going on riffing on that. And he was saying, like, the difference between the black and white and all that and stuff like that, and those kind of jokes.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, you know who my favorite actor is? My favorite actor is Paul Giamatti. And he said, because you look at 12 Years a Slave, where he was one of the slave owners, and you look 2 years later, he was in Straight Outta Compton, where he was their manager.
Mm-hmm.
He was like, over here, he's whipping Lupita Nyong'o. 2 years later, he's crying at Eazy-E's funeral. Now, of course, he didn't have any scenes with Lupita, but the joke still stands. We get what he was going for.
No, he's a great actor that's got a great eye for decent projects. And American Splendor is often overlooked, and it shouldn't be. He's great in American Splendor too. Yeah, he's somebody that he's on a project. I'm like, well, there's some dignity here because Paul Giamatti said yes, but you also have like San Andreas, where you're wondering, okay, who put a gun to Paul Giamatti's head and said, hey, you're in this movie?
Yeah, I think they're planning a sequel that he may be signed up for. But if he's gonna do the great indie stuff, well, no, fuck that. I was gonna say he needs those paid. He's on a show. He's doing fine.
A good show at that.
You don't need San Andreas in your life. What are you doing?
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those things that's like a head scratch. It's like, how did they get Paul Giamatti involved? What did they promise him?
Maybe he just really likes The Rock. That's believable.
Everyone likes The Rock. He's only the most charming man that ever stepped on planet Earth. All right, so what do you got for number 4?
Well, I mean, it pretty much carries over. It's Jack Lemmon. Jack Lemmon, somebody else that kind of just completely mastered this. Sometimes I'll be comedy, sometimes I'll be drama. Sometimes you won't know until we get to certain portions of certain movies, where we have stuff like Some Like It Hot, obviously comes to mind, or The Odd Couple. So Some Like It Hot obviously is a purely comedic performance, and he got nominated for it in leading. He had already won for Mr. Roberts, which was also kind of a light part, if I remember correctly. There might have been some drama in there. It's been a while since I saw Mr. Roberts. It's fuzzy, but yeah, when you look at stuff like his really broad comedy, because when he did comedy, like straight comedy, it was usually big, very broad. But then you had stuff like The Apartment come along, which was very interesting because he's obviously a very, I suppose you could say, a Jack Lemmon-y character in it. But there's a lot of dark shit in The Apartment. Where, do you ever have those moments where, probably not, but because you're married and all that, but those fears that, like, if you think about like Phoebe Cates in Gremlins or something, how Christmas is that area where everything is like joyous, like people are saying Merry Christmas on the streets and stuff like that, and trying to be nicer to each other and stuff like that. Maybe sometimes that's a myth, but there's times where you can also actually see it. And like, there's snow and there's lights and just everything about Christmas is sort of joyous about it. But even if that is the case, there could be an underlying factor of either there'll be people that don't feel that way at all, like it gives them the exact opposite feeling, and if anything, it just reminds them of what they've lost, and it makes it worse. Like what Phoebe Cates talked about in Gremlins, of how like the suicide rate goes up during the holidays and stuff like that. That's basically the territory The Apartment touches on. And it's like, even if you love Christmas right now, you could have this inherent fear inside you of this won't last. Like, what if like future Christmases aren't like this? Like, what if you lose everything? And it's in those kind of fears. And that's basically the kind of stuff The Apartment's dealing with. So you can see where the heavy stuff comes into The Apartment, despite the fact that it also has a comedic feel to it. In kind of, they're both kind of meshing together. And then a couple of years after The Apartment, he had Days of Wine and Roses, where he plays the full-on alcoholic. And so some people think Days of Wine and Roses is a little melodramatic, and I get it. Like there are times where it can be a little Lifetime movie, I guess, without a better term. But I still think there's something really real to it. When he kind of went into the whole, he was kind of known as the over-the-top comedy, and I feel like this sort of The Apartment going into Days of Wine and Roses was kind of it was almost like, I feel like I'm saying this a little too off the cuff, without a shitload of proof, but in the moment, I want to say he kind of took over for Jimmy Stewart in regards to the everyman, like the very conflicted everyman. And then he was able to run with that for a while. And then you go to the 70s and you get what's probably my favorite performance of his with the China Syndrome. Or when we talked about Dreyfus in Close Encounters and the way he portrayed obsession. And it's like we kind of get another obsession vibe with his character in the China Syndrome, where he like fully believes something, but it's like there's the whole conspiracy angle, and is everybody in danger? What do people know? What do they not? China Syndrome is a really creepy movie for the kind of movie that it is. And it's his performance at the core of that is what really brings that feeling to life. And Jane Fonda obviously also is amazing in it, but he's what I really took away from that movie. Then you go into the 90s, and he's still going strong with Glengarry Glen Ross also being one of his strongest performances.
He's brilliant, Glengarry Glen Ross.
Where he's like he's so beaten down and so tragic and sad. especially when the reveal comes in at the end. And you just see the desperation,
Hmm.
and it's like yeah, and it's so heartbreaking. And then, as if that's not enough, we had these remakes I was talking about coming in, these TV remakes where he started to shine all over again. It
Hmm.
was pretty much just constant until he was gone.
Hmm.
I mean, he was always great, and that didn't even touch on like his comedies from the '60s. His really over the top comedies, like Irma Deuce is a really great one. Good Neighbor Sam is a great one. Operation Madball, the one he did with Mickey Rooney. All of those are really fun. Like he's somebody love LUV. It's
When you went
I
to
don't
the
know.
'90s, you forgot. When you went to the '90s, you forgot to touch on his minor part in JFK.
Yeah, and even when he was doing stuff that was a little too delayed, like The Odd Couple 2. Like The Odd Couple 2 is such a forgettable '90s comedy. Like it didn't really have that '60s feel at all that the original had. It was like a straight up just forgettable '90s comedy. But he has one delivery in that I have always carried with me. it's it's if I remember correctly, it's the whole movie's vague, but this one scene where they end up losing the car in some dramatic fashion, and they end up getting lost, and this causes Lemon to go on a tirade. And he's like, "Oh, we're lost. Oh, I'll just look at the map. Let's see. Where's the map? Oh, that's right. It's in the fucking car." That was the Odd Couple 2's PG-13 F ball.
That's a good one.
And it's like the way he was able to do like he's another person we're doing anger and frustration, that's the word for a lot of Lemon's comedic performances. And he just mastered that. But like I said, through all the decades and the way it got more and more, like the way it sort of transitioned from comedy to really heavy drama to almost sad and tragic, but it's like but there was still like some sort of, you just sort of feel upbeat in general when you see him. Like there was like a shine he brought to just like his presence just brought to the movies that he was in, regardless of the sometimes depressing nature of them or the way over the top comedic nature of them. And he's really kind of been unmatched, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
So I think that's pretty much as far as I can probably take that, especially with where we are on time. So
Well,
um,
this will help shorten the time. My number 3 is Denzel. We kind of already hit on Denzel, talked about him.
we are we on 4?
Oh, I skipped 4. Let's go back. So I want to talk about 4. Number 4 for me is Bill Murray.
Okay.
Bill Murray is one of the greatest. He's up there with Lithgow as far as one of the greatest assholes ever put to film.
Yes. There is a prime example of this, and I'm waiting for you to bring it up.
There's a couple examples you could use.
Oh yeah, for sure. There definitely is, but one especially always comes to mind.
The two that come to mind for me are Peter Venkman, of course, and Frank Cross in Scrooged.
Yeah, Frank Ross is where I was going.
Yeah,
He might honestly be.
he is so despicable in Scrooged.
We have Alistair Sim in the original, or like the most well-known A Christmas Carol. We
Hmm.
have George C. Scott, who we talked about. We have Albert Finney in Scrooge the musical.
Hmm.
They're all great. Even Jim Carrey in Zemeckis' movie is great.
I just watched that for the first time not too long ago. I really did enjoy that.
But I honestly, truly, fully believe my favorite incarnation of Ebenezer Scrooge is Frank Ross.
Yeah.
Like I truly believe that.
Hmm.
Because his monologue at the end, like his 15-minute or something monologue at the end, how does that not get you amped for life?
Yeah.
Mm,
And it's Scrooged is such a great modern take on that story.
yeah.
Such a great modern take. But I mean, Bill Murray's got backlogs for days of great things. Groundhog Day, the original Caddyshack, Ghostbusters,
Stripes.
huh?
Stripes.
Stripes. Even when you get into later years, you've got Royal Tenenbaums, Lost in Translation. Fuck, Bill Murray's the best part of Space Jam. When he hits the golf ball and just stays frozen watching it, kills me every time.
Larry's not white. Larry's clear.
What about Bob, like you mentioned earlier?
Yeah.
Where he's just so clueless about everything going on around him. It's just so funny because Bill Murray is such a great asshole, but Bob Wiley is such an innocent in the world.
Yeah.
But I mean, and you
You
talk
mentioned
about his asshole roles. He was an asshole in Stripes, asshole in Scrooge, asshole in Ghostbusters, asshole in Groundhog Day. I mean, it's his thing. Asshole in Lost in Translation.
you mentioned Tenenbaums. Might as well just say Wes Anderson in general.
Yeah, his Wes Anderson stuff's great. The fact that, you know, he is it Rushmore that he did for free just because he loved the script so much?
He tried to do it for free. I don't think SAG let him.
Oh. But it's and Bill Murray's another one of those. You hear such funny stories, and he's such a. It's almost mythical. Like there's a story that floats around on the internet all the time, where Bill Murray walked into a Wendy's and took someone's fry and said they'll never believe you. It would not surprise me if that was a true story.
When you were talking about the assholes he's played,
Mm-hmm.
did we touch on Ernie McCracken?
No,
That's kind of
I'm
the.
saving that.
I was gonna say that's kind of the top of the mountain in his asshole.
1996 was a good year for asshole sports villains. We got Ernie McCracken and Shooter McGavin in the same year. God bless 1996.
uh,
Bill Murray, like you look at it, like yeah, Randy Quaid's the funny Amish guy. Woody Harrelson's great. I mean, Bill Murray as Ernie McCracken steals the fucking show.
there's some, yeah. Kingpin is a really great. Kingpin's one of the funniest and best comedies that we have. But something in the air changes when Ernie McCracken walks back into the movie.
Yeah,
It takes it to another level.
it does, which is so funny because a lot of movies, the comedies especially, would start to die off at that point. We start to go more into our dramatic bent. We're done having fun. We're kind of moving towards a conclusion. But with Kingpin, when Bill Murray walks back into the movie, like you said, it's like it breathes new life into it.
Yeah.
It's like it keeps it going. But
Then he's really good in his new one, the new Sofia Coppola, On the Rocks.
mm-hmm.
Where he's kind of I mean, it could seem like he's just kind of coasting through it, but the way I talked about it was he has just about as much comfort with Sofia Coppola as he does Wes Anderson.
Mm-hmm.
You really get because there's some times where he's maybe possibly phoned it in or he's just kind of there.
Mm-hmm.
But it's when he's in a Wes Anderson or he's in a Sofia Coppola, you really get the sense that he is absolutely ready. Like he wants nothing more than to be there for them.
Yeah, he really brings it when he's doing those movies. And it's always great to because Bill Murray it's really easy for him to phone in a role and he's somebody that you can really tell when they do. But when he's got a project that he's passionate about that he's working on, you see that come through. And it makes that project so much bigger and so much better. It's like if you make a movie and Bill Murray's doing it and he's on board with what you're doing, you know you've written something special.
Yeah, because he's one of those ones where when you say you can tell he's phoning it in,
Mm-hmm.
it's probably more often than not. You can almost imagine the director, whoever it is, some no-name director off camera like a heckler, just screaming, "Do Venkman, do Venkman."
Yeah. Yeah, and it's always special when he brings that extra little bit to it. But
Another great one that's a small part is his. I believe when the movie first came out, he wasn't credited, but his credit has since been restored. His small part in Tootsie is really
yeah,
memorable.
yeah. And it's just like, I just enjoy when he's on screen. When I get an invested Bill Murray, I want to see where we're going, because if he's invested, I have every reason to be invested.
There's also something kind of natural about him, especially in his early days,
Mm-hmm.
where it was earlier, like it might seem like a lesser of his movies, but early this year I talked about Meatballs,
Mm-hmm.
and just the casual back and forth he has with the kid in that just feels so like you'd think they'd known each other forever.
Yeah.
So there's a comfort there. It's weird how often I use the term comfort or comfortable talking about Bill Murray, but that's when he's like in it. That's kind of what it feels like.
Yeah. When he hits his stride and can deliver his lines so naturally, I mean, it makes it feel a lot more genuine. It doesn't seem like an actor reading lines. It seems like a guy just in a situation talking about it.
Yeah,
And he's great at that.
yeah. Because isn't he notorious for going off script?
Yeah.
Like he'll scan a script once and then just kind of do what he wants. And I think it was Harold Ramis that said he kind of got used to just writing him that way.
Yeah.
And that in that particular case, you can kind of get the vibe of you tread the line of him just kind of doing the same character because it's like is he just being him if that's what he does?
Hmm.
Is he says fuck the script and does what he does? Like there's just that natural nature to it that you can't really copy or really pinpoint, but it's
Yeah.
there.
And he's also really good at the asshole that has a character arc.
Yeah,
Because once he
without
comes
it being
out of asshole territory, he's very good at playing a warm, reformed character.
yeah, because
Like you said, his monologue at the end of Scrooged is great.
with how much of an asshole his character is, that monologue should not have worked. Like we should not feel as warm to him as we do when that movie ends, but we do.
Hmm. I mean, it borders on corny that even his boss that was gonna fire him at the start of the monologue was like smiling by the end of it. Yeah, that's
Oh,
kind of corny, but it works. He makes it work with the passion that he brings in the monologue.
I do love I do love when Robert Mitchum is first there and he's talking about how cats are watching TV. He's like, let's put mice in Scrooge so the cats have something to be entertained by. It's like, or what if he dangles string like Kojak? And then it's like, as he's walking out, he just turns to Alfred Woodard and says, "Call the police."
Uh, yeah, I think also Scrooge has held up so well over the years because of his performance.
Yeah. So for some people, Scrooge might seem like a weird one to single out, but that's really the performance of his that's always really that I've just really taken to over the years.
Hmm. Most people will throw in Groundhog Day or Lost in Translation. For me, it's Scrooge.
And he goes, you definitely got your Ghostbusters fans out there.
Yeah,
Those people are an army.
yeah. I mean, it did make my top list of films.
All right. Well, do we do my number three, or do you want to do your number three since we know who he is?
Well, my number 3 was Denzel, so we can move on.
Is that just you saying Denzel's number three, or are we gonna get back to him?
I think we pretty much hit everything.
Is there anything you wanted to add, like last minute, or is that about it? I don't think we mentioned Philadelphia.
He's the most underappreciated part of Philadelphia. But we'll talk about Philadelphia here in a minute.
Ah, all right. I'll make my number three brief because I know he's coming back.
Okay.
That would be Jack Nicholson.
Mm-hmm.
We have explored a lot of his earlier stuff, like The Crybaby Killer and Little Shop of Horrors and stuff like that. I've tracked down stuff like The Shooting and Rebel Rousers and stuff like that. All the stuff that's like pre-Easy Rider. And obviously Easy Rider was the break.
Mm-hmm.
Like Easy Rider was it just immediately like they redid all the posters for his other movies pre Easy Rider to say, hey, this is the guy from Easy Rider, to sell them.
Mm-hmm.
And he's not even in Easy Rider that much. That's all it took. And then Five Easy Pieces was after that, and then gone. Just gone.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing about it was, no matter how far back you go or how small the part was, he always had command of the screen from the word go. Like from the
Mm-hmm.
first time he ever stepped on the screen. Wasn't he in a couple episodes of Andy Griffith?
Yeah.
Like even then. And he's another one where he gets a lot of shit for doing the same thing, for playing Jack or whatever the hell they say. But there's so much in regards, like there's a lot of his stuff we've already talked about. Like I did a Cuckoo's Nest video, we did a Chinatown video. There's The Last Detail, and all this stuff was in succession. It was The Last Detail, Chinatown, Cuckoo's Nest, and they just kept going. I was thinking there was something the same year as Chinatown as well. Um, but just kind of like there was that story that Aaron Eckhart told that I think pretty much sums this up, where they were doing the pledge and they were on the same plane, and Aaron Eckhart was like, he was having an internal monologue with himself. He's like, don't geek out, it's Jack, like don't do it. But he's like, I can't help it. And he's like, okay, I just got to say that, and he just started listing his movies, and he said, I mean, these are the movies that like made me want to be like the actor that I am. And it's like these movies just made me. And he just started listing them off. And Jack's response was, like I always say, I don't make movies, I make classics. And it's like that's about it. It's,
I think
and
Man Trouble would beg to differ.
well, every now and then we're gonna have those things. And there's some performances he's been nominated for that a lot of people I know don't even like Ironweed.
Mm-hmm.
I like Ironweed pretty well. I love Preethi's Honor. A lot of people hate Preethi's Honor, even though it's a Best Picture nominee he was nominated for. I love Preethi's Honor. Um, just throwing that out there. We talked about The Shining more times than we know what to do with.
Burton's
Uh,
Batman we've talked about.
but and there was something though about Chinatown where it's the idea of like crazy Jack. We were talking about why Stephen King was pissed off that he was cast as Jack Torrance, but but when you look at stuff like Chinatown, where he can do subdued, much more subdued than you may be expecting sometimes, and it's well, the thing about that is that I think he just has such a command of the screen that there are sometimes where people think he's being over the top when he's not. That's just the impact that he has.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, obviously there is some stuff that's like really like despite some nuances for sure, McMurphy is very over the top character just in nature. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how is Jack Nicholson gonna star in a movie called One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and not be an over the top character?
The Joker.
Yep. But then you've got people that kind of bring a bit of, I mean, some people still thought he was just playing Jack, but I thought he kind of brought an interesting sensitivity to terms of endearment in a movie that's already based solely on its emotion.
Mm-hmm.
And like his little subplot has always been one of the more intriguing aspects of that movie. Because like I said, he walks onto a screen, and where else are you looking?
Mm-hmm.
And then he can do all this over the top stuff, and then just hit us with a Schmidt suddenly. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like how good is he in About Schmidt? I dare you to tell me right now how fucking good he is in About Schmidt.
Wasn't he the front runner until Adrian Brody got it that year?
It was like him versus Day-Lewis back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
And Brody
Which
was like,
I still don't know how Adrian Brody pulled that off because Daniel Day-Lewis is damn good in Gangs of New York too.
yeah, because there was another story. He's another one. He just all these stories where Robin Williams had that story about him when he said we had all these. This is how on the level Jack is. we had all these stories that are told about Robin Williams, and now we have Robin Williams telling a story about Jack. Where it was the thing where they won the same night. When Williams won for Good Will Hunting, he was winning for As Good as It Gets. And when they went backstage for the press room, Jack turned to him and said, he called him Robbo. And he said, "Well, Robbo, now I have one for every decade." I think that's why everybody wanted him to win for Schmidt, was so he could continue that.
What's funny is if he would have done an ounce of campaigning, he probably would have won for The Departed too.
Yeah, there was also a great story very recently on Conan that John C. Reilly told, where we had talked about how funny it was, their interaction in Anger Management. I had completely forgotten that they were in Hoffa together.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was U2, where John C. Reilly said his big moment was he was doing Hoffa, nobody really knew who he was, and Jack was Jack. Like, Jack was like really prime Jack at this point. And he was using a urinal, and Jack walked up to him and said, like, "Hey, we're going to go to a U2 concert. Are you coming?" And he's like, "Just talk to, the girl out here, and she'll take care of you, and she'll get us all there." And so he went to the U2 concert, and he waited in the wings until the concert started, so that when all the crowd is looking at the stage, that's when Jack would walk in. Because when Jack walked in, whether it be on screen or in real life, everybody's head turns.
Mm-hmm.
So his idea was he will go through the crowd after everybody's looking at the stage, but it's like still just everything parted like something biblical. And he would walk through. It's like that's the kind of presence that he brings to the screen. When you look at like it's like Aaron Eckhart was doing. Like, what else can you do but just list them off? A Few Good Men. I just want to say A Few Good Men.
You haven't even brought up As Good as It Gets.
Yeah, I've mentioned it in passing with the Oscar thing, but yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you just say the name of one of his movies, and somebody will just agree with you and say, "Oh, yep, that was prime fucking acting."
I feel like Nicholson is where the term movie star came from.
It's got to be at least a certain era of it.
Mm-hmm.
No thing where it's like anybody else looks like a douche when they wear sunglasses inside, and Nicholson is just star power. But that's the thing too, is that connotation between, like movie star and actor kind of thing. It's like with movie stars is more of a presence thing, and actors are obviously the acting thing. And obviously there's the ones that are just both. Like as far as like the ones we currently have, like obviously Nicholson, and I think Denzel falls in there.
Mm-hmm.
DiCaprio, I'm sure. All people we've mentioned that are currently working now. There were a lot of those back in the day also, like Montgomery Clift, for instance. But yeah, Jack is just a whole other level of legend. That he hasn't made a movie in 10 years now.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just some random Reese Witherspoon movie with Paul Rudd.
James L. Brooks was attached, let's be fair.
Yeah, but at the same time, take James L. Brooks out of the equation. Jack's last movie may well have been a movie that starred Paul Rudd and Owen Wilson.
Yeah.
And for 10 years, hardly he made a statement about Kobe. And every now and then, like, his grandson will give us an update and say, yeah, like this past Thanksgiving or last Thanksgiving, his grandson gave an update and said he was feeling good and happy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, because people want updates on him occasionally, because we just don't know what's going on with him.
The thing that really is interesting to me too, also, is his reputation with women and how popular he was. When Me Too came out, his name was not even dropped once.
Yeah, everything I hear is so like Jennifer Lawrence had a story where he was like really gentlemanly, like that video that went viral where she won and he like kind of hit on her afterwards.
Yeah.
He said something like he left her like a message or something, and it was kind of nice. And then he sent her flowers that said "Miss you already."
Mm-hmm.
And that's all he did. That's the only movie made. And then,
but he had to try because it was Jack.
There was one story Gina Davis had where way back in the day, she came home to a message on her answering machine, and all the message was, "Hey Gina, it's Jack. So when's it gonna happen?"
But it's funny, like I have a biography that's written about him, and all the women that he was with, they say he was nothing but a gentleman. But then you hear the same story that he slept with so many women that his bed had a permanent dent in it. Like, like that's a fucking legend.
And the point I was getting at was, even though he hasn't made a movie in 10 years, and it was kind of an underwhelming way to go out, should that be his last? Because there was the whole thing where he was going to do the Tony Irvin remake.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of fell through. It was probably when Brad Gray died that fell through, actually. But that's the producer he contacted about it. But that unfortunate moment when he's gone is gonna be like Hollywood is gonna go fucking silent.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's going to be felt when that happens.
Yeah.
In a way that we've hardly seen.
Mm-hmm.
And I really fucking dread that day.
It's just a shame. Like, I know he did the Bucket List for fun, and it's a fun old people movie, essentially. Let's be realistic here. You have How Do You Know, which is what you said it was. It's a real shame that The Departed wasn't his exit. Because what a hell of an exit to go out on.
Yeah, because the other thing that goes along with the Bucket List is that Reiner did it.
Mm-hmm.
And him and Reiner teaming up gave us one of his most dynamic powerhouse performances there is.
Mm-hmm.
In a movie that he's barely, that's another case of him barely being there. And yet
He's barely in it. It's a 2.5 hour movie. What do we remember? His monologue at the end.
And not only that, there's so many people that know that monologue front to back.
I took a Sporkle quiz on it the other day and got all of it. Like, but and it's funny because A Few Good Men is a good movie. It's a damn good movie.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what we took from it.
Yeah. It's like there's a reason he's the second credited in that one, despite lack of screen time, and there's a reason he is first credited playing the Joker in a movie called Batman.
And I would say he probably gets more screen time than Keaton.
We've talked about this before, but it's worth mentioning again. There is a long portion of Batman that's just him.
Yeah. I've heard a lot of people say that Joaquin Phoenix's movie is called Joker, but the first one that should have been called Joker was Batman '89.
Especially since we get the origin story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We get no origin story for our main character. We get an entire origin story about his nemesis clown, but the dude that wears a rubber bat suit and goes out on the streets, we get, oh yeah, his parents were murdered. And that's all we get.
And how much of a blessing was it for, like, it's one of those things that we're just so familiar with now, like it's just a part of our lives.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, how much of a blessing is it when you really think about it to like comic book fans that an actor of his caliber played that character? Like it's almost unthinkable.
Yeah. I mean, granted, he only took it because Warner Brothers threw a bone to Robin Williams, but
And he's still making money off of it.
yeah. He could have only made Batman and it would have paid for his entire life. Because I don't know where he got the idea to ask for merchandising, but it was a damn genius move.
Yeah. Well, I don't think we talked about Five Easy Pieces enough,
Mm-hmm.
but I have a feeling that he'll be back in this conversation.
Yeah. There won't be a lot more to say, but he'll probably make an appearance.
All right, so we on two now? Because are you done with Denzel for sure?
Yeah.
All right, so we're on number two.
Mm-hmm.
We're doing my number two.
Yeah.
All right. Number two is Jimmy Stewart, naturally.
Not that there is a good choice.
So let's go in so where we started with Jack Lemmon, now we can go in reverse. Where I talked about Jack Lemmon kind of started off doing the comedy thing, doing supporting characters, did some really, like the wacky comedy kind of thing. And then there was a turning point where he went into like really sort of kind of daring for what he was known for at the time, a turning point that took him into darker directions and got to really show all the different things he could do. And I said that was Jimmy Stewart, and then Lemmon I feel like kind of picked it up in kind of the area of the 60s. Stewart is on another level that can barely be described because obviously, once again, a lot of comedies, a lot of supporting roles, and then he kind of started moving up. The stuff with Capra in particular was obviously his big turning points, like Mr. Smith. Because I want to say it was a lot of comedies and supporting roles, and then Mr. Smith was kind of a big moment. And then once,
And not to mention the fact that he had to make a splash in a year that the movie industry gave us Gone with the Wind and The Wizard of Oz.
yeah, and he lost the Oscar to Robert Donat for Goodbye, Mr. Chips.
Mm-hmm.
Which of course he would win the very next year for the Philadelphia Story, which is mostly a comedic performance,
Mm-hmm.
which is very interesting. And yes, as everybody's like, if there's one word that everybody has made synonymous with Stewart, it's everyman, right? I mean, like he was that.
Yeah.
But all the different directions he went, because when you look at the history of It's a Wonderful Life, you'll read about how this was a big turning point. Because at one point, he left Hollywood to go off to World War II, where he became an actual legit war hero. And then he came back, and I think he was gonna retire from acting. He was seriously considering retiring. And then Capra was like, "Well, I'm doing this thing, so we'll see where that goes." And I think even after they made It's a Wonderful Life, he was still considering retiring.
This is
But
before he ever got with Hitchcock.
yeah, like I said, there's so many layers to the success of his career. But starting here, after he came back from World War II, a hero, into high rank, and he was playing George Bailey, and it's like where audiences were kind of stunned that this was our everyman. This was like the comedic guy. This was like even Mr. Smith, as big as that performance was, is still like that could be us. And George Bailey goes to so many dark places to the point that he's getting ready to jump off a bridge by the end. In this movie that's ultimately known for being uplifting. And it's like this is where you can tell that he had a darkness in him that he was willing to show and explore. And it's like he ended up being the killer in After the Thin Man, the second Thin Man movie, which was like 10 years before It's a Wonderful Life. But that was like, that's one of those twist reveals. So like he didn't really get to play killer very much. So this was when he kind of started to really get to explore the darkness of the places he could go. And then eventually we had all the Hitchcock movies he was in, all the westerns he was in. Particular, the Anthony Mann ones especially were the ones where his characters were like really like on the edge, like Winchester 73 and The Man from Laramie and The Naked Spur. And these are some of the best westerns like ever. He was in a couple with Wayne. He was in Man Who Shot Liberty Valance and The Shootist. The Shootist, which I think was Wayne's last one or one of Wayne's last ones. Cheyenne Autumn. He's in a full segment where he plays Wyatt Earp. And it was actually deleted from the theatrical version. It wasn't until the extended cut came out on video that you got to see Jimmy Stewart play Wyatt Earp. Yeah. And it's the best part of that movie. The best part of that movie wasn't even in the movie initially. And Shenandoah is a really good one. But every now and then, even though he'd go to these dark places and play these dark characters and all these different, darker stories, like where some of these westerns would go and all the Hitchcock movies, every now and then there were still, oh yeah, there's the old Jimmy Stewart that we still love, like when stuff like Harvey would come around. It's like Elwood P. Dowd is pure Jimmy Stewart. amidst all these movies where he got to really play with the dark angles. And it's like in 52 when The Greatest Show on Earth came out, he kind of got to play an unsavory character. He's the clown, where he's like a criminal in hiding,
Mm-hmm.
which is really interesting. And there's, and I said, all these different aspects, whether it be the westerns or the Hitchcocks or the comedies or the dramas, and his performance was always hitting. There was one movie called Pot of Gold, which is kind of a piece of shit, and he thought it was a piece of shit as well. He thought it was his worst movie. So whenever he was doing something not that great, he knew he was doing something not that great. And there's so many like legendary ones, so many I'm forgetting because he did so many. Destry Rides Again with Marlena Dietrich, which was another western where he was kind of the character that, like, he was in a position of power because he was like a sheriff, but he didn't like violence and stuff like that. He was that kind of character.
Mm-hmm.
But then, like I said, when you compare that to like his later westerns with like Anthony Mann, and it's like it's such polar opposites, and he nailed it like every single time. So, and he's another one where you could just go on, like I just say his Hitchcock movies altogether or his westerns altogether. I could talk about each of those individually all night. So I would like to touch more. I've talked about quite a few Hitchcock movies. I'd like to get more into his because I'm really much. I've talked about Rear Window. I haven't talked about Vertigo in full, or Rope, or The Man Who Knew Too Much. I'd love to get into those, but for the sake of time, I guess we'll keep this moving.
Okay. My number 2 is Tom Hanks.
Yes. Who obviously has many times been compared to
Jimmy Stewart, which is an apt comparison. Tom Hanks is another one that made the seamless transition from comedy to drama. And
Yeah.
can still leave elements of comedy in there.
He's almost Keaton-esque in that regard.
Yeah, it really is. Because, I mean, you take stuff like his first Oscar nomination was Big. He
Yeah.
played the whole version of a 12-year-old boy.
There was, and you can tell Big was a big deal. I was watching one of those SAG interviews with Dennis Quaid,
Mm-hmm.
and he was asked, do you have any career regrets? Like, do you regret turning down anything? And usually actors say like, oh, I don't do regrets, or you can't live with regrets, or something like that. Just immediately he said, I turned down Big. And he looked like he wanted to jump off a bridge.
Who was it that said that?
Dennis Quaid.
Oh. Yeah, and it's in every movie he's in, most of the movies he's in, he's the nice guy.
Yeah.
But Hanks also, he doesn't get to do it very often. But when he wants to do deranged, dude can do deranged. I'm looking at The Burbs.
Yeah.
The Burbs is wonderful.
When you say deranged, what I'm thinking of is like the end of The Burbs, like when he's at the end of his room.
Like one of my favorite stories about The Burbs is when he jumps in the back of the ambulance and just lays on the stretcher. That was ad-libbed by Tom Hanks. That wasn't in the script.
I love the line. He's just been blown up, right?
Uh-huh.
I love that the line is, "Take me to the hospital. I'm sick."
It's just so funny. He just had such an eye for comedy and what to do to make people laugh. And that continues now with Saturday Night Live. How popular is David S. Pumpkins?
The sketch never should have worked.
Yeah, but because it's Hanks, it did. And then you look at all the drama he's got going on. Apollo 13, Forrest Gump, which is kind of a comedy drama, Captain Phillips. I mean, stuff like that works.
Oh,
I mean,
God,
he was the one.
Captain Phillips is so. Have you watched Captain Phillips yet?
No, I still need to.
Oh my God, it's some of the best stuff he's ever done.
And I mean, look at the filmography of the person you're saying this about.
Yeah.
I mean, he had Private Ryan, which we forgot to mention for Giamatti.
Yeah.
But you've got Private Ryan. You've got that. You've got, oh Lord, one of the movies that doesn't get checked out enough. Another instance, like we talked about earlier, Paul Newman ruling ass. Road to Perdition is fan-freaking-tastic.
Yes.
Road to Perdition is one of those movies too that, like, you could enjoy the movie for what it is, but you could just get just as much enjoyment out of it by muting the whole movie except for the score.
Yeah. I want to say that's Thomas Newman, I think.
That sounds about right.
And speaking of composers named Newman,
Mm-hmm.
who are related to each other,
Mm-hmm.
did you say Toy Story already?
Not yet.
Yeah.
You've got Toy Story. You've got oh Lord, Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood that just came out.
Yeah.
Where when it came out, that Tom Hanks was cast as Mr. Rogers, everybody just went, "Yep."
It was so good. I kept being afraid it wasn't going to actually happen.
Mm-hmm. And of course it happened, and of course he was fantastic in it. Did he end up getting the nomination?
Yep.
That's what I thought.
His first one since Castaway.
Which is freaking tragic. We didn't even mention Castaway
Yeah.
when we were going through his filmography. We skipped right over Castaway. But the dude just like he's kind of like Nicholson in a way too, where you could look back at his filmography and just grab some, and there's Oscar nominations in there. And if there's not, there should be.
Yeah, that I know when we were talking about Denzel, I said that I don't hold Oscar grudges too much.
Mm-hmm.
That's a snub that still stings. I don't know how that happened, but and I'm not alone
Which
in
one
that.
are you referring to?
His snub for Captain Phillips.
Oh.
I actually saw somebody that was not me actually brought that up like last week, and I was like, yes, it still hurts me too. I know.
Yeah. That's like I saw a preview for another movie he's doing.
News of the World.
News of the World. Tom Hanks in a Western. Yeah, I'll take some of that, please.
Reuniting with Greengrass.
Yeah. Greengrass. But anyway, but he's one of those actors that when he comes out with a project, it's like, yeah, I'm gonna watch that shit. Terrible Hair and Da Vinci Code, fine, because he works with it and he does well.
Yeah, I'm not big on the Langdon series, but it's any of his collaborations with Ron Howard, like Splash.
Yeah, Apollo
All of his,
13.
what's that?
Apollo 13.
Yeah, his impressions of Ron Howard are gold.
Yeah, and it's one of those things. It's a funny joke that he signs everything T. Hanks, and it's appropriate because every time I see it, I want to be like yes, or I want to be like no. Thank you, Tom Hanks, for existing and making good shit. And if it's not good, at least you were enjoyable. Like another one, not a great movie, but great for deranged Tom Hanks, Money Pit.
Yeah.
But I mean, the only thing we really haven't seen Tom Hanks do is play like a super over the top evil villain, but he could do it.
There was that one segment of Cloud Atlas
Mm-hmm.
we've gotten. Actually, he played a couple of dark characters in Cloud Atlas.
Yeah, and it was welcome because it was like, yep, I'd watch that too.
And the Lady Killers, G.H. Dorr is technically a villain.
Yeah, but it's comedic. So comedic.
He does need.
Tom Hanks was in a movie with J.K. Simmons and Marlon Wayans, and ended up being oh man, his name escapes me.
Ryan Hurst.
Yes, playing this complete idiot, and Tom Hanks outshines them all.
And this
in the comedy part.
This is to fail to mention. This is a Coen Brothers movie you're talking about.
Yeah. I want more Tom Hanks with the Coens. Why did this only happen once?
They're all about being weird with their casting. Like another SAG interview I was watching was William H. Macy. And after they talked about Fargo, the interviewer said, "I'm really surprised that you haven't done another movie with the Coens." And he went, "Yeah, me too."
William H. Macy was somebody else I consider putting on my list. But no, everything, like, if Tom Hanks is in it, I want to see what's going on. I want to take some time and figure it out.
A couple of Spielberg outings we didn't mention: Catch Me If You Can and Bridge of Spies.
He's brilliant. Catch Me If You Can. He is so underrated in Catch Me If You Can.
And you would think he'd be overshadowed by Rylance in Bridge of Spies, but I think he's really good in it. That's the thing, that was with him not getting nominated for like Captain Phillips and stuff like that, but Barkhad Abdi did, and Barkhad Abdi ended up winning BAFTA, and Rylance ended up winning the Oscar.
Mm-hmm.
That's because instead of backing his own campaign, he would back his co-stars.
Mm-hmm.
And it would
Look at
pay
Catch Me
off.
If You Can. He wasn't nominated, but Walken was.
Yeah.
The dude's one of those that just he makes everybody in the movie better around him.
That's pretty much exactly what Mark Rylance's Oscar speech said.
Yeah, and he's one of those people. He's perfectly fine with that.
Yeah.
Tom Hanks doesn't need the credit. He would rather put together something good and elevate people with it. And acting is one of those things that it's hard to find somebody that wants to collaborate like that. That's interested in making sure that the product is better than their individual contribution of it, that he lives it.
He also made his own stamp in romantic comedies with the Meg Ryan movies.
Yeah. Yeah. And you were talking about the day that Jack finally kicks the bucket. How headline news was it, and how worried was everyone when it came out that Tom Hanks had COVID?
Yeah, and then those weird and gross conspiracy theories started, which kind of tainted everything, but that's...
Mm-hmm. But when it first happened, I remember reading the headlines. They're like, no, you can't have Tom Hanks. We're not done with him.
So, yeah.
I look forward to checking out News of the World, because I've seen the previews are enough to show me, yep, this is going to be good. This is going to be worth investing a couple hours in. And that's pretty much the summation. Anytime I watch a preview with Tom Hanks in it, I'm like, yep, that's going to be worth investing a couple hours in.
Did you go into Philadelphia as much as you wanted to?
I didn't. Tom Hanks in Philadelphia is one of the few movie roles that I get emotional watching it. When he's dying at the end and his funeral at the end, he's not even in the funeral scene. You never see his body, but he made such an impact in the movie. You still feel it without having to see what happened. We don't see him die. His last scene, he's dying, but we don't see him take his last breath. But you feel the sadness of him being gone. And the fact that he went up against Denzel, who, like you said, was really on a hot streak coming out of Glory and being nominated there, to completely take over the movie to a point where Denzel was shut out of a nomination.
Yeah, Malcolm X had just been the previous year.
Mm-hmm.
So is that Hanks?
That's Hanks. Like I said, T. Hanks is appropriate. Thanks, Hanks.
So at about what, the 3.5 hour mark, we have reached number one.
I didn't get to talk about Turner and Hooch.
Oh, Turner Hooch is great though.
I just got to mention it, so that's good. We can go.
I mean, I don't even mean that like sarcastically or ironically. I love Turner and Hooch. I really do.
I know. Normally, the movie where the main character like has to get along with a dog doesn't work all that much. But Tom Hanks fucking made it work.
The ending's a little sadistic though. I don't care for the ending, where they trick you into thinking Hooch survived and it's just an adorable puppy.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, it's nice to see an adorable puppy, but thanks for making me think Hooch had survived when he didn't. Like, your adorable puppy, this is the last shot of the movie, is the reveal. Hooch died. Whose call was that?
Maybe it was Craig T. Nelson's.
Yeah, he's the guy that pulled the trigger, so.
Okay. Speaking of which, let's transition. Your number one's Craig T. Nelson, isn't it?
That's how much I love all the right moves. All right.
I thought it was just your love for Coach coming through.
So another person that's considered like an objective great that I didn't mention is Hackman.
Mm-hmm.
So it's worth noting that his absence is here as well. But
I'll take take the opportunity to say I left somebody else off my list as well that I really wanted to put on, and I just couldn't justify it. I really wanted to put Victor Garber on this list.
I laugh just because that's, I don't know why, but I genuinely love Victor Garber. So that's out there.
Like, I finally watched Happiest Season. Victor Garber's great. Didn't expect
Nice.
anything less.
His name is like right over my shoulder in small lettering. I know you're number one. Do you have one guess of mine?
No. Because I
All
would
right.
have thought DiCaprio or Bridges.
Interesting. It's somebody that's gone. It's somebody that's been gone for quite some time.
Is it Spencer Tracy?
Yes, it is.
Ah.
I don't know why, but I had a feeling you would know if you thought about it.
I thought it was weird that he had. Sorry. I thought it was weird he hadn't come up yet.
Yep, he's right here.
Mm.
And I will try to make this as brief as I can. I'm going to try. So here we go. The thing that really got me attached to Spencer Tracy just right away, like I saw one movie and it was like, oh, this guy's one of the greatest actors of all time. And I will think that forever. And nothing will change my mind, was of course Captain's Courageous. Where he plays the sort of, once again, it's one of those cases where it's like kind of a cliche character now. But it's where he's like, you have the kid that's like, he's here because he's, you know, spoiled and rich and misbehaving and all that. And he basically needs to be taught to be like a good and better person. So there's that adult that he's going to meet that's going to kind of make him that. And of course, that would be Spencer Tracy playing a Portuguese person. I don't know how that would go now, but it works here. And it's, and he's one of those people that's just like instantly comforting. He's like somebody to look up to. He's got a really tragic death scene after all the attachment has happened, but it's like just as he's teaching, you know, Freddie Bartholomew how to be a good, or grow up to be a good person, and like, you know, do the right thing, whatever it is that role asks for. We have this naturally tragic death scene that's inevitable, but because they're on a boat and obviously they're in, you know, there's a whole bunch of chaos and eventually he is going to drown. And so we get a whole moment where they get a moment together where Tracy just kind of accepts death and like even in his dying moments is comforting this kid. And it's really the goal. It's the, like I said, it's a really cliche part, but it's really the gold standard for that kind of part where it's like the person that you look up to or the role model or whatever. Sometimes maybe an unexpected role model when you look at the other guys that are here. But then it was, and of course he won his first Oscar for that, and then he won again the very next year for another movie called Boys Town, which he is almost equally good. And I think another great thing about this is the way he was paired with Mickey Rooney. Really brought out something great in, because Mickey Rooney is also in Captain's Courageous, but Boys Town is basically the him and Mickey Rooney show, and the two of them together really brought a bunch of power to that movie. But continuing on with other people he worked with multiple times, he did 2 court movies with Stanley Kramer, 2 movies I've already brought up, Judgment in Nuremberg and Inherit the Wind. And of course, like I said, you are familiar with Inherit the Wind, which is great. And in Judgment in Nuremberg, he's the judge. And there's a lot to go into with this, but the thing that mainly talk about with time constraints would be Judgment at Nuremberg ends with Tracy giving an 11-minute monologue. This 11-minute monologue was done in one take. And that's the thing is, you have all these, you know, actors in it, like Burt Lancaster and Richard Widmark and Marlene Dietrich and Judy Garland and Montgomery Clift, and they're just coming in and out of this movie. That's what it is. Like they're either, you know, like Richard Widmark's the prosecutor. We have Maximilian Schell, who won Best Actor over here. And you have like Burt Lancaster, Judy Garland, and Montgomery Clift, and all them taking the stand one after the other. Judgment Nuremberg is a fucking incredible movie, if you didn't notice. And it's just 3 hours of this, 3 hours of actors doing this incredible shit. And then it kind of ends with this 11-minute speech. And he was so like sort of aware the greatness of other actors. Like when Maximilian Schell was doing a big scene, apparently Tracy like looked at Richard Widmark between takes and said like, we got to watch out for this kid because he might outshine us and he might win the Oscar for this thing. And of course, Maximilian Schell won, despite being fifth credited under all these people. Maximilian Schell won the leading Oscar, just as Tracy thought he would. And talking about other nominations, there is he did a few movies with Gable, one of which was San Francisco. This could be an exaggeration. I feel like Tracy's in this for like 15 minutes. It's an hour and 55 minutes. I feel like Tracy's in it for about 15 minutes. But he made such an impression, he got a leading nomination. And then
Anthony Hopkins, that shit.
Yeah, and I'm not even mad because it's Tracy. It's like, look how low down his name is too. You got Gable and Jeanette MacDonald up here, and Tracy's down here in the smaller lettering. Leading nomination for like 15 minutes, and I'm not even mad. But he and Gable also did some more forgettable movies like Boomtown and Test Pilot's not really forgettable, but it's sort of not as big as others, like as big as you would expect when you think of a teaming of Tracy and Gable or something like that. Mm-hmm. Then there is a movie that John Sturges made called Bad Day at Black Rock, which is incredible. It's very short. It's like an hour and 20 minutes, and it's like a Western, but it's also like a film noir where Tracy's one of those guys that just kind of blows into town, and he's wearing a suit and a hat, and he's got one arm. So you would think, oh, this guy is not going to do much of anything. He's just going to stroll in and out or whatever. But there's a lot of like really fucking bad dudes in this town that are covering up like a murder, where it's like Robert Ryan, it's Ernest Borgnine, it's Lee Marvin, and they're all just being really bad. Like 50s Ernest Borgnine was like huge and intimidating. And there is a scene where Spencer Tracy takes Ernest Borgnine down with his one arm. And it's incredible. And it's kind of like one of those, good versus evil kind of things at its core. It's incredible. He basically did a one-man show with The Old Man and the Sea. I mean, not only is it a one-man show, he narrated it. He went all out on The Old Man and the Sea, and he's the thing that really comes into play with that. He got his own version of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, which didn't blow me away as much as Frederick March, but just the fact that he got to play the part is exciting enough, even if the movie was somewhat of a letdown, but that's fine. He did war movies here and there like everybody did at the time. He was Jimmy Doolittle in 30 Seconds Over Tokyo. But there was always time for like lighter stuff. Like he was in the original Father of the Bride. And he was It's a Mad World. There's one from the 30s with Jean Harlow called Libeled Lady that I thought was really good and really funny. And then, of course, I'd be remiss if I was talking about Tracy and I didn't talk about him and Hepburn, of course. Mm-hmm. I've got a whole box set of all their movies they did together, and is there a screen couple that was more magnetic and intoxicating to watch than the two of them? I'm thinking probably not. I don't even know who second place would be, but that's and there was the thing about Tracy though was, especially in like all of his parts, or at least most of them, you always got the vibe that he was like the representation of just good, like what's good in the world and stuff like that. And it's like you would have almost killed to have seen him just take one part where he was just completely and totally and completely evil. There was a fake poster that was made once that I saw it once years and years ago, and I have never forgotten it. The concept of the posters was to take modern movies and recast them with classic actors as if they were movies made in like the 50s. Mm-hmm. And somebody reimagined a poster for Drive where Gosling was James Dean. I think Eva Marie Saint was Carey Mulligan. Gable was Bryan Cranston, and Tracy was Our Brooks. And it's like, if that existed in the 50s and Tracy played a part like that, that would have been perfect. But I almost think he probably never would have.
Mm-hmm.
because he was just all about playing the character that was like good to his core, at least most of the time. And weirdly, we were talking about how a lot of his Gable pairings were underwhelming. He did a couple movies with Jimmy Stewart, and they're just throwaway movies. Malaya, I think, was one, and The Murder Man. Movies I have no memory of. But yeah, so I think that's a positive note to go out on. Just a guy that was just like almost every character he played was just like the representation of good, which is something that you don't really see that often, even though it would have been totally crazy and totally fun to see him go all out with like a totally evil character. But because I'm not even sure he would have done that. So I think that's it for mine.
You didn't even mention Guess Who's Coming to Dinner.
Yeah, I was trying to clump it in with Hepburn, but I believe that was his last one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I think Hepburn said she never actually saw Guess Who's Coming to Dinner because it came out after his death and it would have been like too much.
Mm-hmm.
But
So it's kind of fitting that his last movie, he was married to her.
yeah, this is that box set with all theirs together.
Mm.
Where it's Woman of the Year, Keeper of the Flame, Without Love, The Sea of Grass, State of the Union, Adam's Rib, Pat and Mike Desk Set, and Guess Who's Coming to Dinner.
I thought there was only like 4 of them.
Yeah, and there's a documentary that's a tribute to him by her. So,
have you watched that documentary yet?
Not yet,
Mm.
but I do need to get on. There's so much shit I need to get to. I know, but all right. So I don't know how many people watching this, number one, would make it this far, and number two, know who your number one is, but surely context clues by now have gotten them there.
Yeah, and with time constraints and the fact we've already discussed this person, this will be relatively short. Number one's Jack. And I'm trying to remember. I was trying to remember when I was doing this list where he came in at number one, where I decided, yep, this is the dude. And it was when I was in college, and for part of a college assignment, I watched One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Wasn't your assignment to actually like buy the book and movie?
Yeah. And where I noticed that it had made an impact on me was we had to write a report on it. And I got my report back from my teacher, and my teacher was like, your report was really good if this was a report on Jack Nicholson's performance at One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. So I ended up getting to rewrite it, make it more about the book itself. But from there, and then the fact, that, he plays the ultimate supervillain to my favorite superhero of all time, that helps. Against my favorite incarnation of Batman ever, that helps. People throw at me all the time, Ledger, Joaquin Phoenix, no. To me, Jack is the original and best Joker. Well, not the original, Cesar Romero is the original, but he's the best of all of them. Because you just look, it's perfect casting. I mean, he already looks deranged. Put him in clown makeup with an exaggerated smile, and you're done. That's all you have to do. But like you said before, it's just a laundry list of just classic and heavy-hitting movie, one right after the other. Even some of his lesser ones, he could score Oscar nominations in. And in a movie, like, take one of his last movies, like we were talking about earlier. I said I wished he could have gone out on The Departed. You take a movie that in 2006 had Leonardo DiCaprio, Matt Damon, Mark Wahlberg, Alec Baldwin, Martin Sheen, and he blew them all away to the point that he backed out of campaigning because he thought the movie was bigger than just him. When, if I remember right, he was the odds-on favorite to take home supporting actor pretty early.
Yeah, I remember that buzz vividly.
Mm-hmm. Because I remember there was like early screenings of it, and they're like, well, Jack's getting number 4. And then he backed out and was like, nah, don't want it. And of all people, Mark Wahlberg ended up being the only one nominated, which, don't get me wrong, Wahlberg's great in it. But they're just outshined by them all. They're outshone These guys that are all in their prime are outshone by a guy that hadn't done a movie in 4 years and whose heyday was 30 years ago. And then you hear all the crazy stories out of The Departed. You know, the gun under the table wasn't really there, and Leonardo DiCaprio's face is genuine shock of, oh my God, Jack Nicholson's going to blow my fucking head off. You've got the strap on in the porn theater with Matt Damon that he just brought to the set. Jack Nicholson literally either went to a store or went through his drawer at home and said, haha, I'm going to take this in and fuck with Marty and everybody else.
Well, you were talking about the dent in his bed. He probably had that.
But I think he's just the guy that when you think movie star, that's who you think of. When you think of celebrities that are mysterious and people are interested in what they do, I think he's the original concept of that.
I think you skipped, when you said 4 years, I think you skipped something that also kind of
Oh,
showed
I skipped Something's Gotta Give. I did. Still 3 years. And the movie he did that before that was a romantic comedy. And the movie before that, he played a guy who was taking a road trip because his wife died and wanted to reflect on everything. And then you get, out of nowhere, batshit crazy Frank Costello. He starts this crazy, weird-ass movie off with a monologue.
A monologue that goes in a lot of different directions that says a whole lot about his character in like 3 minutes.
Yeah. I mean, it's just one of those cases where if he's on the screen, you're not bored. Because you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know. You could be watching a completely straight-laced movie, and then all of a sudden it's just, hey, there's batshit Nicholson again. Look at The Witches of Eastwick. Look how it ends. Most of the movie, he is so subdued.
I was getting ready to ask you to go into The Witches of Eastwick a little bit.
I mean, he's so subdued for most of the movie, and then he goes fucking insane, and then you find out, oh, he's playing the fucking devil.
Which is perfect casting. I mean,
yeah. I mean, they made the movie work. We're in the mid-90s, 25 years after his heyday. He's an older dude at this point. They made him into a werewolf.
A werewolf that pisses on James Spader.
Yeah. It's insane. It's totally insane. And the fact that he was never afraid to work with early directors. Like, I remember a story from the 89 Batman where Jack Palance was giving Tim Burton shit because Tim Burton wasn't really sure what he wanted Palance to do, and Palance started to get on him, and Jack Nicholson actually stepped in and took up for Tim Burton, and told pretty much Jack Palance to take a walk. I mean, Jack Nicholson told Jack Palance, of all people, take a fucking walk. You're being too intense. Jack Palance is like the embodiment of intense.
Didn't he also have to take up for Skyman Carruthers with Kubrick?
Yeah, and Shelley Duvall. He told Kubrick, he said, "You're gonna kill Shelley Duvall if you don't knock it off."
And I think at this point everybody's seen that video of him psyching up for the door scene.
Mm-hmm.
There's that crew member walks by looking like he's genuinely afraid of getting hit with something.
Yeah. And I mean, the Crossing Guard and the Pledge. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, Sean Penn had never directed before that.
I think the Indian Runner came before those.
The Anthony Hopkins movie? Or no, that's The World's Fastest Indian.
Yeah, Sean Penn and David Morse and Viggo.
Oh man, David Morse was another character actor I thought about putting on here. We could just do a top 10 of character actors. That'd be a fun list.
We really could.
But no, I just think he's kind of the embodiment of when you think Hollywood, that's what you think of. It's classic Hollywood. Him and Warren Beatty running the streets.
Yeah, it's like that documentary on Deep Throat, Inside Deep Throat, when they were
Hmm.
talking about everybody that was in that era and everybody was seeing that movie. One of the interviews is him and Warren Beatty.
Hmm. And it's one of those things too, where like you said, he hasn't made a movie in 10 years. If he came out next year and said, "Hey, I'm making a movie," you damn better believe most people are gonna be like, "Oh, what the fuck is he doing?"
Yeah, the Tony Erman remake kind of came from out of nowhere.
Hmm.
I'm still disappointed it's not happening.
Yeah. But I mean, by the same time, at least we didn't get another like rules don't apply.
Yeah, that's pretty much the worst case scenario.
Yeah. I mean, How Do You Know is not great to go out on, but it's at least watchable.
And at least it was with
The bucket list isn't great to go out on, but at least you have Morgan Freeman and you have
yeah.
some fun.
And How Do You Know does have Brooks, who we know he always trusted. So
Yeah. I mean, I still think it's kind of sad that his last movie isn't The Departed, but especially since it's fitting he dies at the end of it.
yeah, two of his three Oscars came from Brooks.
Hmm. Yeah. Of all people, James L. Brooks or Milos Forman. And the fact that Burton got him to come back to do a dual role in Mars Attacks.
And I'd always heard that he always thought positively of Burton,
Yeah.
like from a creative standpoint.
Which is interesting because you look at Burton and you look at his style, and you would think any classic actor that's not Walken or Christopher Lee would be turned off. But I think that about sums it up.
All right. So I had a feeling this one would go long, but I wasn't sure how long. So
Hmm.
we're not quite as long as the
Top 15.
yeah, but we're getting close. Actually, it might almost be there. So yeah, I'm doing the same old shit. A lot of reviews are coming, like Tenet and Mank and Wonder Woman and Ma Rainey's Black Bottom and Sound of Metal and Soul, The Midnight Sky, all that shit that's come out in the last few days or so, or weeks, whatever. Um, and that's what I'm gonna be doing. So
You're going to be pretty busy.
yeah, I don't know what we have planned next, but I assume we'll figure that out. Oh, I've got two more Emily Blunt videos as well.
Mm.
So I don't know what we're planning next, but I assume we'll figure that out.
Yeah, I would assume so.
All right. So do you have anything else to add?
No, I think we've talked about everything. I mean, I think we've talked about 24, well, 20, 2021. Really good actors. Go check out their movies.
And we'll see. Maybe down the line we will try to throw the actresses into the mix,
Hmm.
and then we'll go from there. And then maybe somewhere down the road we'll try the character actor thing.
Yeah.
So even
Or
though that,
or maybe actors that don't get enough attention.
so we're gonna have to throw our own definitions out there, but we'll figure it out.
Hmm. I've always wanted to try a segment where we take a classic movie that's got a decent sized cast and try to recast it.
That could get us into trouble, but we could see what happens.
It could, but at the same time, I mean, there's worse ideas out there.
Yeah. So I think that's pretty much all I have to say. So if you don't have anything, is that it?
I think so.
All right.